Chapter 41. The Owl Hermione. By the way, where's Hermione? Eisen intentionally showed a curious look, but in fact, from the perspective of God, Hermione was lying on the hospital bed, and he had seen that cat-headed person appearance a long time ago. Here, when Hermione was with us, something happened. The two looked at each other, and finally it was Harry who stammered out the ins and outs. In other words, Hermione was going to add Millicent's hair to the polyjuice potion, but she added a cat's hair into it, causing her head to become a cat's head? Although she knew what happened, but after listening after Harry's words, Eisen was still speechless. Recommended, Yegwa reading and chasing books is really easy to use. Download Yegwa here, everyone can try it soon. Yes, Hermione is really unlucky, Ron said, and there seemed to be a hint of schadenfreude on his face. But, the heir to the Chamber of Secrets hasn't been found yet. What should we do? Harry's face was full of worry. There was no way. Originally he thought he could find evidence from Malfoy to prove that the other party was the heir to the Chamber of Secrets, but it turned out that he was not. Of course Harry knew that he was not the heir to the Chamber of Secrets, nor the murderer of the attack, but this meant that the murderer was hiding something deeper. Okay, don't worry. Dumbledore will arrange for the professors to conduct a big inspection. Be careful and don't run around. Waving his hand, Eisen gave a warning while comforting him. When Harry and Ron left Eisen's office, Eisen noticed that their expressions were not too conflicted. Looking at the alchemy experience in his hand, Eisen closed it and put it away. It has to be said that Dumbledore's attainments in alchemy have indeed reached the level that Eisen still needs to look up to. After just flipping through it for a while, Eisen felt that he had gained something. After coming out of the office, Eisen paused, turned and walked towards the school hospital on the second floor. Anyway, Hermione is also his little fangirl. Since he already knew what happened, how could he ignore it? It was very quiet in the hallway because all the little wizards went home for the Christmas holidays. Changing his gaze, Eisen noticed that there was no one around, so he disappeared in a flash and appeared at the entrance of the school hospital at the same time. After pushing open the door, Eisen saw a hospital bed blocked by a curtain at a glance. Apparently, if nothing unexpected happened, Hermione was lying on it, and she just covered herself with the curtain because she didn't want others to see her situation. Professor Eisen? Madame Pomfrey next to her was fiddling with some herbs, and when she saw the door was pushed open by Eisen, she stepped forward and asked, "Are you here to see Hermione?" "That's right. According to Harry and Ron, something happened to Hermione. I'll see if she's okay." Eisen smiled and nodded at Madame Pomfrey, but his gaze directly penetrated the curtain and saw the woman on the hospital bed. Hermione. As if hearing Eisen's voice, Hermione trembled with the cat's head on her head and quickly buried herself in the blanket. "That's not very serious, but it will take a while to recover." Madame Pomfrey was very calm, and she didn't seem interested in knowing what Hermione did. After speaking, she looked at the bag in her hand herbs, turned around and entered the side compartment. Hermione? Eisen went straight to Hermione's hospital bed, lifted the curtain, and sat down. When he saw that Hermione was still wrapped in a quilt, Eisen reached out to lift it up. "No, Professor Eisen. I look so ugly." Hermione clutched the quilt tightly, and a slightly crying voice came out, obviously not wanting Eisen to see her appearance. "Well, don't worry about Hermione. Madame Pomfrey just said that she will recover after a while." Seeing this, Eisen withdrew his hand. While thinking about it, the healing bracelet just appeared in Eisen's hand. Then, he was going to give Hermione the healing bracelet. But then, Eisen's movement stopped, because he suddenly discovered that the healing bracelet might not be useful for Hermione's current state. After all, the effect of the healing bracelet was to be able to deal with injuries or some minor hexes and curses, but Hermione's problem was an act of voluntary transformation with polyjuice potion, not damage or curse damage. Therefore, healing bracelets should have little effect. So, can you restore it to its original state with your own transfiguration skill level? Eisen thought for a moment, and thought there should be no problem. However, since Hermione's animal transformation state was caused by the wrong use of compound decoction, he felt that it would be better to wait for the effect of the potion to dissipate slowly, just to be on the safe side. After all, he had never dealt with this kind of problem before, and it would be even worse if he got it wrong and turned Hermione into something weird. "Professor Eisen, my plan has failed." Hermione's tone was full of frustration. Harry and the others found out that Malfoy is not the heir to the Chamber of Secrets. "Don't worry, Professor Dumbledore already has a plan, and the Chamber of Secrets will be found soon, and then as long as the basilisk is dealt with, no one will be attacked again." Eisen comforted Hermione, but his thoughts spread. He was thinking that maybe he could take advantage of this big search and tell Dumbledore the entrance to the Chamber of Secrets, but he dismissed the idea as soon as it came up. You know, Dumbledore has basically guessed that the key to opening the Chamber of Secrets should be Old Mouth. Therefore, if Eisen directly told Dumbledore about the entrance to the Chamber of Secrets, he would have no way of explaining how he knew about it. Therefore, he had to wait for an opportunity. "Thank you, Professor." Hermione seemed to calm down, and then she seemed to be groping for something. I wrote it myself. I don't know if it will be useful. A small hand stretched out from under the quilt, holding a few pages of manuscript paper. Let me see. Eisen took the manuscript paper from Hermione with a slight smile, and after a quick look, there was a strange look on his face. Is this a movie script you wrote? After flipping through it, Eisen couldn't help asking. Yes, Professor Eisen. There was a little embarrassment in Hermione's voice. You said that I am an employee of the film company, but I don't know what to do. I watched the company's The Man from Earth movie, so I wrote a little bit. I don't know if it will be useful. It's great, Hermione. You've really helped me a lot. Eisen's face was a little hot, but he didn't have the nerve to tell her directly that the film company he opened in Diagon Alley had closed down. But it's okay. Anyway, the film company he opened in London's Muggle world is operating as usual, and it will be fine to revise the script and hand it over to the company for filming. However, Hermione, you are a wizard. You can write some movie scripts if you have time, but you can't delay your studies, you know? I see, Professor. Okay, I'm leaving first. You have a good rest here for a while. Simply, there was nothing else to do, and Eisen planned to leave. Well, goodbye, Professor. Hermione waved her outstretched hand, but kept her head from showing. Smiling, Eisen didn't care, and left the ward straight away. Chapter 42 Nothing. Professor Eisen. Just as Eisen was leaving the school hospital, a familiar voice stopped him. Suddenly, a strange premonition enveloped my heart. Eisen paused, turned his head and saw Lockhart waving to him from the corner of the stairs, with Professor McGonagall following him. Professor Lockhart, Professor McGonagall, are you going to start inspections? Seeing Lockhart wearing a purple robe, with his wand tightly held in his hand, looking ready to go, Eisen asked directly. That's right, Headmaster Dumbledore wants us to go through Hogwarts Castle, but for safety reasons, we have to be in pairs. Professor McGonagall said this with a stern tone. I'm with Professor Lockhart? Eisen pointed to himself, then to Lockhart, showing a questioning gesture. Don't worry, Professor Eisen, don't worry about being attacked. I'm Gilderoy Lockhart, Order of Merlin, 3rd class, honorary member of the Anti-Dark Arts League, 5-time winner of the Wizard Weekly Most Charming Smile Award. With me, no problem. Lockhart didn't wait for Professor McGonagall to speak. He came to Eisen first and hugged him. Oh, is that so? Eisen's face froze, and with a little force, he quietly broke free from Lockhart's arm. Don't worry, I will protect you. Lockhart was not annoyed at all after being freed, but instead stretched out his wand and swung it vigorously, making this promise. Professor Eisen, be careful. Professor McGonagall winked at him after finishing speaking, and then turned away after glancing at Lockhart. Seeing Professor McGonagall's gesture, Eisen understood it. This is obviously to make Eisen look at Lockhart, so that there is no surprise for him. Professor Eisen, I think we can start from the basement first. What do you think? Lockhart said enthusiastically. I think this suggestion is very good. I have no objection. Since Lockhart was so interested, Eisen didn't refute much. Anyway, for him, it doesn't matter where he starts. Walking through the empty corridors along the way, Eisen discovered that the ghosts in the school were also shuttling through the rooms or classrooms in pairs, as if they were looking for something. Headmaster Dumbledore ordered all the portraits and ghosts in Hogwarts Castle to move. Seeing Eisen looking at the ghosts, Lockhart explained first, but I have to say, this is a wrong decision. You know, Lockhart, are enough for this operation? Yes, you're right. For Eisen, Lockhart was annoying enough. So he had to perfunctory each other. Unfortunately, Eisen and Lockhart wandered around from the basement to each classroom or each room, but failed to find anything suspicious. I met other professors on the road, and through conversations, I found that the teachers who patrolled together didn't find anything unusual there. In the next few days, even though the castle was almost completely under martial law, the basilisk seemed to have disappeared. The professors searched and searched, but found nothing. Professor Lockhart, who was still in high spirits at the beginning, stopped bragging about his achievements in front of Eisen after he was slapped in the face by his own words after failing to find anything useful for 3 days. I'm sure the secret room must be closed. After the preliminary inspection, Lockhart swore in front of Eisen and the professors. However, judging from the serious expressions of Dumbledore and others, no one would take his words seriously. Obviously, after a few days of thorough investigation, everyone basically realized the seriousness of the matter after they found nothing. Because it was not discovered, it meant that the murderer of the attack was still at large, which meant that Hogwarts would encounter another attack next time. But this is too dangerous for the school. However, after the search of Hogwarts Castle turned up nothing, Dumbledore had to stop such actions. As the weeks passed, Hogwarts Castle remained peaceful. In this regard, Eisen did not act rashly. In addition to practicing spells every day, he studied the alchemy experience sent by Dumbledore. I have to sigh, Dumbledore's attainments in alchemy are indeed profound. After several weeks of research, Eisen already feels like he has learned a lot. On the table in the office, there is a speculum. Eisen, who has completed the detection method, intends to disassemble it. When researching some time ago, he originally planned to add some functions to the original Looking Glass to make an enhanced version of the Looking Glass. However, due to the bottleneck and the inability to balance various functions, there was no way to integrate the functions and the production was suspended. During this period of time, after reading through Dumbledore's alchemy experience, Eisen suddenly found that the ideas and skills he needed to make an enhanced Looking Glass could faintly find traces in it. So, today Eisen is going to try again. Since the function of the enhanced version of the Looking Glass that Eisen intends to make is to combine the ability of the original Looking Glass with the function of displaying names on the Marauder's map, Eisen does not intend to completely imitate the look of the Looking Glass, but to use based on flat mirrors. A faint stream of light flashed in Eisen's eyes, and the magic pattern in the Looking Glass was clearly reflected in Eisen's mind. He stretched out his hand and put his fingertips against the Looking Glass, and under his full concentration, a bright light emerged from it, and then quickly sank into it, in the flat mirror next to it. With another wave of the hand, one after another rune scripts were entangled and printed on the flat mirror. After more than 10 minutes, Eisen stopped all movements. The speculum purchased earlier had been completely scrapped, but the plain mirror in front of him looked extraordinarily gorgeous. Picking up the plain mirror, Eisen showed a smile. The enhanced version of the Looking Glass is finally made. But I don't know how it will work. Stretching out his hand to lightly brush the mirror, a ripple like water swayed, followed by a red name flashing continuously in the mirror, as if warning Eisen. Looking carefully, Eisen could see that the name was Peter Pettigrew, and the place where the name flashed was the dormitory of Ron and Harry in the Gryffindor Tower. The effect is not bad. In this way, the initiative should be increased a lot in what to do in the future. Eisen had a look of joy on his face, and then put it away. It seemed odd to Eisen that it had been so long since Fred and George had gotten the Marauder's map that they were able to avoid Filch on their night tour. But what puzzled Eisen was, didn't they find out that Pettigrew Peter's name had always been with Ron? The book-chasing app recommended to me by an old book friend who has known me for 10 years, Yegwo Reading. It's really easy to use. I rely on reading and listening to books to pass the time while driving and before going to bed. You can download Yegwo Yudu here. Or, did the twin brothers never care about their younger brother? But even if you don't care anymore, it's impossible not to pay attention once for such a long time. In other words, Pettigrew Peter participated in the production of the Marauder's map, and outsiders cannot see the producer's name and whereabouts. So he was finally found by Lupin, who was also the maker of the Marauder's map. Various speculations flashed through his mind, and Eisen finally shook his head to clear the complicated thoughts in his mind. Chapter 43 After the Holiday. After the Christmas holiday, the little wizards returned to Hogwarts again. Perhaps because of a holiday, the oppressive atmosphere in Hogwarts was gone. However, when the little wizards learned that Hermione appeared in the school hospital after her disappearance, they all took it for granted that she had also been attacked. However, the misunderstanding brought about by the little wizards saved Harry a little bit of staring. Because many people knew that Harry and Hermione had a good relationship, so Hermione was attacked, which made many young wizards think that it was not Harry who did it. So by the way, many young wizards believed that Harry was no longer the heir to the Chamber of Secrets. But because of the fact that Harry had exposed himself as a cliché, even if his suspicions had been lowered a bit, he was still the prime suspect. Previously, Ernie of Hufflepuff had been promoting the fact that Justin made a slip of the tongue in front of Harry Potter, saying that he was a natural muggle, which led to Harry attacking Justin. But after Hermione was attacked, Ernie's movements also stopped a lot. In this case, the little wizards would choose to walk past the entrance of the school hospital after class, wanting to take a look at her. But fortunately, the curtain on the hospital bed can block Hermione. Otherwise, Hermione would drop out of school in shame if everyone sees that she has turned into a cat head. Of course, being in a hospital bed didn't mean Hermione would be resting forever. When the new term started, Harry and Ron brought Hermione homework every evening so she could catch up. If I grow a beard on my cheeks, then I can rest and don't have to do my homework. Ron couldn't help but complain to Harry every night when he saw Hermione lying on the hospital bed and still had to catch up with her homework. Don't be silly, Hermione won't miss her homework. Although Harry also took it for granted, he knew that Hermione would not take the opportunity to be lazy. Fortunately, after a few weeks, Hermione's condition has improved a lot. Not only did the facial hair disappear, but even the eyes turned brown again. Have you found any new clues? Hermione's tone was a little brisk, but in order to prevent Madame Pomfrey from hearing, she deliberately lowered her voice. No. Harry's voice was slightly lowered, looking visibly frustrated. Hagrid must know something. Ron made his point. But you all said that the professors knew about Hagrid's expulsion, but Hagrid still stayed at Hogwarts, which means that he is definitely not the heir to the Chamber of Secrets. Although Hermione also felt that she could learn something from Hagrid, but judging by the way the professors seem convinced that Hagrid isn't the murderer, their plan doesn't seem to be working. Yes, the professors trusted Hagrid, so Hagrid must have been wronged. Harry gave a thoughtful look. In other words, the real heir to the Chamber of Secrets blamed Hagrid for the attack? The current heir to the Chamber of Secrets blamed Harry for the attack? Ron couldn't help swallowing, and even turned to look around, as if the heir to the Chamber of Secrets could be picked at any moment. To be honest, I have been using Yegwa to read and read books recently, changed sources, and read aloud with many timbers. Yegwa Udo Android and Apple are all available. But Hagrid is not a student of Slytherin College, and he has this Titan blood, so he cannot be a descendant of Salazar Slytherin. Hermione couldn't help but point out. Doesn't that mean that Harry, who has already exposed his old ways, will not be able to clear himself of the suspicion? I mean, if the real murderer is not found? Ron said with a worried face. If Hagrid is expelled because he was wronged, it means that the real heir of the Chamber of Secrets has not been found. It is still hidden in Hogwarts. The worry on Harry's face became more obvious. If there is another attack, will Harry be expelled and sent to Azkaban? Ron looked at Harry, not only worried, but also sympathetic. Stop talking nonsense. Professor Dumbledore and the rest believe that Harry is not the murderer. Thinking of the attitude of the professors towards Harry, Hermione directly denied the possibility that Ron said. Oh yes, that's right. The worry faded from Ron's face. However, I think we still need to find the heir to the Chamber of Secrets hidden in Hogwarts, so as to prevent the attack from happening and remove Harry's suspicion. Hermione proposed the direction to solve the matter. However, it is almost impossible for several people to find the hidden murderer. After all, it was Voldemort's diary that really did the trick. I don't think we need to worry too much. Professor Dumbledore will take care of this. Ron reassured Harry they were going to the library. Since Snape gave them too much homework, they had to spend more time on it. However, just after Ron had finished speaking, an angry shout came from upstairs. Filch's voice, Harry whispered, looking suspiciously at the stairs around the corner. Could someone be attacked again? Ron, who had just said not to worry, immediately became nervous. Then he and Harry stood motionless around the corner, then poked their heads in Filch's direction. Come and trouble me again, like I'm not doing enough work. No, I'm going to Dumbledore. Filch's voice faded away, and with a loud slamming of the door, Filch the sound completely disappeared. After hearing the voice disappear, Harry and Ron looked at each other, and then quietly came to the place where Filch usually stood guard. When they saw the place where Mrs. Norris was petrified, a puddle of water even spread halfway down the corridor, they understood why Filch was yelling. Obviously, this level of stagnant water would indeed last a long time for Filch. Still, it looked like water was still seeping from under Moaning Myrtle's bathroom door. To Harry and Ron's surprise, after Filch's yelling died away, there was the cry of a weeping Myrtle from the bathroom. It doesn't look like anyone was attacked, Ron breathed a sigh of relief. Let's go over and see what's going on with her, Harry said, and together with Ron, he lifted his robes and walked over the stagnant water to the door of Moaning Myrtle's bathroom. After entering, the two discovered that the surrounding candles had been extinguished due to the large flow of water. The bathroom was dimly lit, and the floor and walls were equally damp. What's the matter, Myrtle? Harry asked, fighting back the piercing cry of the crying Myrtle. Who are you? Weeping Myrtle emerged from the toilet bowl she was hiding in. You're going to hit me with something again? Why would I hit you with something? Harry didn't understand what was going on. Don't ask me, cried Myrtle, bursting out and spewing a bigger jet of water onto the already soaked floor. I'm staying here and thinking about my own question. Someone thought it was funny to throw a book at me. But even if someone throws something at you, it won't hurt you. Harry glanced back at Ron, then turned his head and said, I mean, that thing can go right through you, can it? Unexpectedly, Harry's words annoyed Myrtle. She puffed up all of a sudden and screamed. Let everyone hit Myrtle with books, because she can't feel it at all. If you hit her 10 points for the belly, 50 points for hitting her head. Isn't it a cute game? I don't think so. So who hit you with a book? Harry changed the subject. I don't know. I was sitting on the toilet seat, and the book fell off my head. Myrtle stared at Harry. It's right there, soaked. Harry looked in the direction Myrtle pointed, and saw a diary with a black cover lying on the floor under the sink. Just when Harry reached out to pick it up, Ron stopped him saying it was too dangerous. By the way, Ron gave him an example his father had said. For example, some of the books confiscated by the Ministry of Magic will burn your eyes if you read them. There are some books that you can never put down once you glance at them. Even after reading a book called The Wizard's Sonnets, you can only speak in doggerel for the rest of your life. But someone used it to smash Myrtle, which means it's not that dangerous, right? Harry thought clearly, and then picked up the diary. Chapter 44 Diary, for subscription. The black cover of the diary looks a bit worn out, and the faded date means that this is a diary from 50 years ago. No, I don't think we can take any risks. Just as Harry was about to open the diary, Ron stopped Harry's movement. Maybe the person who threw it away did so because he thought it was dangerous. But if you don't read it, you won't know what's written in it. Harry had a thoughtful look on his face. Look, the secret room was opened 50 years ago, and this diary was also written 50 years ago. Maybe it recorded something? You mean, it records what happened at Hogwarts 50 years ago? Ron froze for a moment, somewhat disbelieving. But even so, there's no way to know what the truth is. The professor's all I don't know who the heir to the Chamber of Secrets is. Recommended, Yegwa Reading and Chasing Books is really easy to use. Download Yegwa here. Everyone can try it soon. You're right. Hearing Ron's words, Harry was immediately discouraged, but he still didn't understand. However, why would someone throw it away? Was it really thrown away because it was too dangerous? Thinking of this possibility, Harry suddenly felt that the diary in his hand was a little hot. Well, no matter why it was thrown away, it won't be of much use to you anyway, Ron said, taking the opportunity to lean into Harry's ear and lowered his voice. If you hit Myrtle's nose with it, you'll get 50 points. Don't say that. Harry glared at Ron, then looked at the diary in his hand. Say, how about giving it to Eisen? That's a good idea. I think he's not afraid of any danger up there. Ron's eyes lit up, and he didn't mention throwing it away. Professor Eisen, thank you so much. Fred and George thanked Eisen in unison, which made him look confused. When he was continuing to study alchemy in the office, he didn't want the twin brothers to find them. It's okay to look for it, but he didn't expect them to be grateful to him as soon as they entered the door, which made him very uncomfortable. What happened? Why do you say that? Looking at the smiling two, Eisen couldn't help asking. Ha, Professor, we just received a letter from Dad, and that's why we know that you plan to open a store selling pranks made by me and George. Fred winked at Eisen, and then looked at George next to him. That's right, Professor, your vision is amazing. Believe us, those products are very popular. George's tone revealed an indescribable surprise. Apparently, the Weasley twins already knew about the shop being turned into a magic trick shop selling the prank products of the two brothers. It's nothing. I just think that opening a store like this can give full play to your strengths. Eisen smiled. It's hard to say that this is actually a choice after you don't want to quit the lease directly. In fact, Eisen didn't pay much attention to this matter. After all, in the original plot, the two will also open their own magic trick shop. Bang bang. A knock on the door suddenly sounded outside. Okay, Professor, let's go first. Fred glanced at the door, then restrained himself and said to Eisen, That's right, thanks to the Professor. We will definitely bring the Professor a new product experience. George followed up, and then left with a smile on his face with Fred. After the door opened, Harry and Ron came in one after the other, but saw Fred and George leaving. Wow, Slytherin's evil heirs, are you going to attack Professor Eisen? After meeting Harry and Ron, Fred and George had a tacit understanding and pretended to be trembling, revealing in a funny way scared look. Shut up, we have something to do with Professor Eisen. Ron yelled at the two angrily. Harry, don't pay attention to what they say. As Ron spoke, he slammed the office door shut. Harry could only hear Fred and George laughing behind him. It's okay, I think they're joking. Obviously, Harry didn't reject such an attitude. For him, those pointing gestures made him more uncomfortable, and Fred and George made him feel more relaxed. Harry, Ron, do you have anything to do? Looking at Harry and Ron, Eisen couldn't help asking. Yes, Professor Eisen, we found something. Harry and Ron exchanged glances, then took out the diary and put it on the desk. A diary? Looking at the black-covered diary in front of him, Eisen narrowed his eyes involuntarily. Yes, we found it at Moaning Myrtle, who said someone hit her on the head with it. Harry nodded. Ron said some books were dangerous, so? Eisen nodded, took out his wand and pointed at the diary in front of him. A little white streamer appeared and fell on it, and then the light changed into gray light and dissipated little by little. You were right in not opening it. It is probably cursed. It is obviously a black magic item. Eisen said solemnly to the two, but he saw that both Harry and Ron showed a look of fear. Turning to the first page of the diary, Eisen felt a faint feeling of peeping, but was repelled by the huge magic power in his body. And, strangely, a sudden sense of control emerged in Eisen's heart. It made him feel like he could control the diary in front of him. But when he felt it carefully, Eisen felt that this sense of control was a bit elusive. Tom Riddle. Looking at the faint name on the first page, Eisen knew that this diary was Voldemort's Horcrux. I've heard of this name. Ron was stunned when he heard Eisen pronounce the name. Tom Riddle won the Special Contribution Award to the school 50 years ago. How do you know? Harry was suddenly a little surprised. The last time Filch punished me for wiping the medal, I hiccuped and got slugs on it, and then I spent an entire hour wiping the slime off that name. Speaking of the detention, Ron's still a little resentful. So, how did he get the Special Contribution Award 50 years ago? Eisen asked this question, then tapped the open diary with his wand, and the damp pages inside dried quickly. Maybe he caught 30 owls or saved a teacher from the giant Yolk's claws. Maybe he's the one who murdered Moaning Myrtle, Ron said at last, pausing, and then turning to look. Harry was also looking at him. Professor Eisen, Tom Riddle is the murderer. Harry's breath became short of breath. Oh, why do you think so? Eisen marveled in his heart, but asked calmly on the surface. You see, the Chamber of Secrets was opened 50 years ago. Moaning Myrtle was killed, and then Hagrid was expelled. However, Professor Dumbledore and the others believe that Hagrid was not the heir to the Chamber of Secrets, which means that the real heir to the Chamber of Secrets opened into the Chamber of Secrets, killed Myrtle, and blamed everything on Hagrid. Hagrid was fired for this, which means that's where it ends. And Tom Riddle won the Special Contribution Award at that time. Under what circumstances can he receive the Special Contribution Award? Must have discovered Hagrid opened the Chamber of Secrets and let the monster kill Myrtle. But Hagrid is not the heir to the Chamber of Secrets. Hearing Harry's conjecture, Ron took over the words and said something, but the expression on his face was extraordinarily shocked. That's right. So Tom Riddle is the real murderer. He must be the heir to the Chamber of Secrets. Harry nodded, then looked at Eisen with burning eyes. Excellent speculation. You mean, the real murderer who opened the Chamber of Secrets is Tom Riddle? Reaching out to close the diary, Eisen looked at Harry and clicked on it. This? Harry and Ron looked at the diary in front of Professor Eisen and felt chills in their hearts. Can a living person hide in a diary? Or were his conjectures all wrong? Okay, you guys go back first. I will tell Professor Dumbledore about this. Eisen picked up the diary and stood up. I think Professor Dumbledore will know all about it. Okay, Professor Eisen. Harry and Ron glanced at each other and didn't continue to struggle. After Harry and Ron left, Eisen couldn't help showing a slight smile on his face. It seems that the plot will inevitably develop in another direction. Chapter 45. The Conversation with Dumbledore. After pacing the office for a while, Eisen made up his mind and handed the diary directly to Dumbledore. As for, why didn't he keep the diary first? Fool the young Voldemort and see if he could learn something. Eisen says he doesn't need it at all. After all, he was the one with the gold finger, and his strength was growing all the time. So there was no need to deal with Voldemort. Looking away, Eisen spotted Dumbledore in the headmaster's office. With a thought, he disappeared into the office, and when he reappeared, he was already beside Dumbledore. Professor Eisen, I was thinking that you don't really need to rush through Hogwarts Castle in this way, right? Looking at the figure in front of him, Dumbledore raised his eyes, implying Eisen. Okay, Professor Dumbledore, I will pay attention, but what I want to say is that I have something urgent to tell you. Eisen couldn't help but nodded, and then explained his purpose of coming. What's the matter? Dumbledore looked over curiously. Harry and the others found this from Moaning Myrtle's bathroom. I think I should give this to you. Hearing Dumbledore's question, Eisen took out Voldemort's diary without any hesitation. This is, feeling the power of black magic contained in the diary, Dumbledore's expression suddenly became serious. Tom Riddle. Flipping through the diary, Dumbledore saw the name on it. Well, you know, after Harry's snake mouth was exposed, many people have always considered him to be the heir to the Chamber of Secrets. Therefore, he has been investigating the Chamber of Secrets in private. Seeing that Dumbledore realized the seriousness of the matter, Eisen then organized a bit of language and began to speak. Next, Eisen told Dumbledore about the information Harry found, and the result of deducing Tom Riddle is the real murderer. Tom Riddle's identity. After listening to Eisen's explanation, Dumbledore pondered for a moment, then looked at him. Voldemort. Nodding, Eisen showed that he already knew that Tom Riddle was Voldemort. So, you think it was Voldemort who opened the Chamber of Secrets and caused the attack? Dumbledore closed his diary and began to ask Eisen's opinion. No, what happened last year? I mean, when he was going to steal the Philosopher's Stone, he has become a remnant. Eisen shook his head, then pointed to the black-covered diary in Dumbledore's hand. I think even if he wasn't killed, he probably wouldn't come back so easily, so the attack should have a lot to do with his relic. Yes, it seems that I guessed right. Voldemort was not completely killed because of it. Dumbledore's face suddenly had a look of worry. The black magic items he left behind can guarantee that he will not be killed? Eisen showed doubt at the right time, and pointed out the characteristics of the Horcrux. Yes, a very evil black magic. Dumbledore hesitated and said his deduction. Tom split his soul, injected the soul fragments into the diary, and made it into a Horcrux. It sounds very powerful. Voldemort used the Horcrux to ensure that he would not die completely after being killed. However, we destroy this black magic item. Well, this Horcrux will do. Eisen followed Dumbledore's words down. But Voldemort wouldn't be so careless, throwing the Horcrux into the girl's bathroom. Dumbledore shook his head, then gave Eisen a deep look. You mean, since Voldemort doesn't care about this Horcrux, it means that he made more than one Horcrux? Eisen told Dumbledore's guess. Yes, he will. Dumbledore nodded solemnly. If that's the case, wouldn't there be no way to kill Voldemort anyway? Eisen said calmly, I mean, if Voldemort made hundreds of Horcruxes and scattered them all over the world, no one will ever know how many Horcruxes there are, or where they'll be. No, the Horcrux production method is very evil. Every time the soul is split, it will cause irreversible damage to the wizard's soul, which will make the wizard extremely unstable. Even some evil dark wizards, not many people are willing to make Horcruxes. Dumbledore's eyes sparkled. His tone was exceptionally firm, and he gave Eisen a meaningful look after he finished speaking. In other words, it is impossible for Voldemort to split his soul indefinitely. Eisen didn't care about Dumbledore's eyes at all, pretending to be inadvertent and continued. Then he might divide his soul into 7 pieces, except for himself. In addition, 6 Horcruxes will be made? Why do you think that? Dumbledore narrowed his eyes thoughtfully. Well, I'm guessing randomly, but I think 7 is a magic number, isn't it? Eisen spread his hands. Maybe Voldemort thought so too. Obviously, Eisen certainly can't just say everything he knows. So, this is the only way to hint to Dumbledore. However, he didn't know if it was Eisen's illusion, but he always felt that there was a sense of relief behind Dumbledore's serious expression. But on second thought, Eisen realized that maybe that was how Dumbledore really felt. After all, finding the key to killing Voldemort was a cause for celebration for Dumbledore, who had been worried about Voldemort's return. Who do you think brought it into Hogwarts? After pondering for a moment, Dumbledore pointed to the diary and changed the subject. I don't know. Eisen shrugged his shoulders, but I once went to Wes's house as a guest during the year-end vacation of the last school year. Seeing Dumbledore staring at himself, Eisen continued, You know, I was Muggle-born, and Mr. Weasley was also very obsessed with Muggle items, so we had conversations and cooperation. Yes, I've heard that you're working together to open a store in Diagon Alley to show Muggle World movies. Dumbledore's news was really well informed. Yes, judging from the development speed and trend of Muggle technology, it is almost inevitable that the wizarding world will be exposed in the future. Eisen paused. Seeing that Dumbledore had no other reaction, he continued, When the time comes, wizards and Muggle, I'm afraid there will be a lot of conflict between melons. However, the conflict stems from ignorance. So I plan to show wizards Muggle movies to deepen the cognition of the two groups, and maybe they can take precautions. Very far-sighted view. Dumbledore's eyes showed a hint of admiration. But it's a pity that wizards are so interested in Muggle items that the incidence of abuse of Muggle items skyrocketed. Mr. Weasley and I had to suspend this plan. Eisen shook his head, feeling that he was full nothing to do. To be honest, I have been using Yegwa to read and read books recently, change sources, and read aloud with many timbers. Yegwayudu Android and Apple are all available. Afterwards, Eisen told the news that he had heard from Arthur Weiss. At that time, the Ministry of Magic was confiscating dangerous items in various wizarding homes, so I guess that this Horcrux should be a servant of Voldemort's. He was afraid that it would be discovered, so he secretly handed it over to the young wizards who entered school to bring it in. Fair speculation, but no evidence, said Dumbledore. No, maybe there's some evidence, although it's not that direct. Eisen suddenly thought of something. Evidence? Dumbledore looked at Eisen suspiciously. Professor Dumbledore, I think you haven't forgotten how Harry and Ron came to the academy at the beginning of the new school year. Eisen nodded and said these words. Take the flying car modified by Mr. Weasley. Dumbledore showed a surprised expression. That's right, I asked Harry, and Harry said that a house elf named Dobby did it. Eisen nodded. Before school started, Dobby warned Harry not to go to Hogwarts to study. That day during a Quidditch match, Harry was hit by an out-of-control bludger, also by Dobby. Then why would Dobby prevent Harry from enrolling? You know, Dobby is Malfoy's house elf. I see. Dumbledore nodded without saying anything. This attitude made Eisen startled. I haven't made it clear yet. You already know? I mean, Dobby knew ahead of time that there was going to be an attack at Hogwarts? I know. You mean that Dobby found out that Lucius gave it to some little wizard and brought it into Hogwarts, and that's why Dobby did that to Harry. Dumbledore picked up Voldemort's diary book. That's right. Although it's guesswork, everything is reasonable. Eisen nodded. Chapter 46. Harry still has to continue to take the blame. An hour had passed by the time Eisen left Dumbledore's office. Although this conversation was quite troublesome, fortunately Eisen had already said everything that should be said. Right now, Voldemort's first Horcrux diary has been handed over to Dumbledore, so naturally there will be no attack later. Recommended, Yegwa reading and chasing books is really easy to use. Download Yegwayudu here, everyone can try it soon. In this way, there should be no problems for the rest of the second year. But about the basilisk in the Chamber of Secrets, Eisen had talked to Dumbledore before leaving the headmaster's office. The two agreed that although the culprit who opened the secret room had been found out, it was not suitable for the Horcrux to be exposed. Therefore, the true murderer of the basilisk must be dealt with. After all, it is too dangerous for a basilisk that can stare to death to hide in Hogwarts. Moreover, although the incident of the Hogwarts attack has not been reported, it has actually spread. Therefore, if Dumbledore did not want to face the pressure from the school board, finding and killing the basilisk was the most appropriate method. However, Eisen didn't tell Dumbledore directly where the entrance to the Chamber of Secrets was. The reason? Naturally, it was because he had no reason to find out this kind of information. So in order to avoid complications, Eisen didn't have much to do. That night, while Eisen was still in the library, Harry and Ron found him. "Have you finished your homework?" Eisen couldn't help reminding the two sitting opposite him impatiently. "No." Harry's face froze, and he became depressed instantly like a wilted eggplant. For Harry, homework is indeed a mountain that cannot be overcome, especially the large amount of homework assigned by Snape, which made Harry think that he would have to be in the 6th grade to complete it. "It's not Eisen who is teaching you." Ron glanced at Eisen and muttered, "I remember that the homework in astronomy class is the least among all the courses." Hearing Ron's words, Eisen was a little strange. After all, Eisen is still very conscientious and never puts pressure on students. I mean those crystal balls that Eisen taught you to make?" Ron's face was full of resentment. "The professors saw that we were in good spirits, so they increased the amount of homework a lot." "Ahem. Just use it as a practice question. See strategy? Is the co-author really my fault?" Eisen said, taking the opportunity to change the subject. "By the way, are you here for something? By the way, Professor, how about that diary? Is the heir to the Chamber of Secrets Tom Riddle?" Harry suddenly regained his energy. Ron on the side also swept away his depressed expression before and looked at Eisen with great interest. "That's right. The heir to the Chamber of Secrets is indeed Tom Riddle, or that diary." After pondering for a while, Eisen still decided to tell them part of the truth so that they would not have to worry about it all the time. "The diary?" Harry looked at Eisen suspiciously, not quite understanding what he meant. "Do you remember that I told you that the diary is a black magic item?" Eisen asked solemnly. "Yes, Ron said that some books with black magic can be dangerous." After looking at Ron, Harry nodded and looked at Eisen. "That diary itself is very dangerous." Eisen reached out and nodded on the table. "It is the murderer who opened the secret room and made the attack." Hearing such a conclusion suddenly, Harry and Ron were stunned for a moment. "But, Professor Eisen, didn't you say that the basilisk was responsible for the attack?" Ron was very puzzled. "Professor Eisen, what do you mean? That diary is alive, it can speak basilisk, and it can open the secret room and manipulate the basilisk to launch an attack?" Harry said. His whole body shivered, and he looked at Eisen in disbelief. "Basically, that's it. So you have to be careful about what you pick up in the future, otherwise you will run into big trouble." Eisen gave Harry an approving look and then urged, "It's a good thing I didn't open it that day." Glancing at Ron, Harry patted his chest, showing a look of fear. In fact, even if Harry opened it, there would be basically no danger. But in order to make him be more careful in the future and not be so reckless, Eisen didn't say this clearly. "That diary," Ron reacted, and immediately looked at Eisen. "It has been handed over to Professor Dumbledore, so don't worry. The Chamber of Secrets attack should not happen again." Eisen smiled slightly and said the result. "That's really great." Harry beamed, and after an exclamation, he jumped up and clapped Ron's hands. Looking at Harry's attitude, Eisen can actually understand it. In fact, any adult would feel particularly depressed if he was treated as a murderer for a period of time. Not to mention, Harry was just a 12-year-old boy. This time, after hearing the truth of the matter from Eisen and knowing that the attack would not happen again, Harry immediately felt a lot more relaxed. However, because this matter involves certain issues, it will not be announced for the time being. Seeing the smiling faces of the two, although Eisen couldn't bear it, he poured cold water on it. Why is that?" Ron couldn't help but question as the faces of the two froze. If the truth of the matter cannot be made public, doesn't that mean that Harry will continue to be scapegoated and be regarded as the murderer of the attack? Don't forget that the direct murderer of the attack was the basilisk. If the basilisk had not been found and solved, no one would believe that a diary belonged to the murderer. Eisen reminded. But, Ron opened his mouth, but couldn't come up with any rebuttal. In fact, the Horcrux in the diary is the truth about the murderer, which is not suitable for publication. Because Horcruxes were involved, it had to be concealed. Doesn't that mean that everyone else doesn't know about it? Harry looked a little embarrassed. After all, not going out for injustice means continuing to take the blame. That's right. Eisen nodded. Looking at Harry's face, he also felt a little pitiful. No way. Who told Harry to be Voldemort's Horcrux? After hearing Eisen's words, the two were immediately discouraged again. "Harry, have you heard those voices lately?" Ron asked Harry quietly after leaving the library. "You mean those voices?" Harry was taken aback, then realized what Ron was saying, and shook his head. "No, Maybe the Chamber of Secrets is really closed? All the way to the Gryffindor common room, the two put away the prepared homework and put it in the storage ring, and then came to the school hospital. Harry, Ron, you're late. Hurry up, I think I'll be late with my homework tonight. Hermione couldn't help complaining as she watched the two who had arrived late. We went to Professor Eisen. Harry and Ron exchanged glances, then took out their homework and explained their actions. What are you going to do with Professor Eisen? The joy flashed across Hermione's face, and she became interested immediately. It's like this. Harry then recounted the fact that he had found a diary in Moaning Myrtle's bathroom. After Harry finished speaking, Hermione was stunned. You mean, we don't have to worry about the heir to the Chamber of Secrets hidden in Hogwarts? Hermione exclaimed after recovering. That's right, that diary is the one who manipulated the basilisk, and Professor Eisen and Dumbledore already know about it. We don't have to worry about the attack. Harry nodded. But Professor Eisen said that the diary involved some issues and couldn't be published, so Harry has to continue to bear everyone's criticism. Ron curled his lips. It's okay, Professor Dumbledore must know. They must have made plans. Harry said, his worries gone. Since Professor Eisen and the others have already made arrangements, there's no need to worry. Hermione narrowed her eyes, but she didn't care about Harry's continuing to take the blame. It's just a bit weird to think that the adventure will end just after it starts. Chapter 47 Lockhart's Performance Moment. Please subscribe. At the beginning of February, Hermione finally got out of the hospital bed in the school. Apparently, after such a long period of treatment, Hermione's head had recovered. No beard, no cat hair. Hermione, who became a little beauty again, naturally felt much better. However, because the teachers and students in the school did not know that the real culprit of the attack had been found, they were still suspicious all day long, for fear of encountering some terrifying monsters. I think we have to find the entrance to the Chamber of Secrets, find the basilisk and inform the professor. When Harry encountered Pointing again, he finally couldn't help telling Ron and Hermione about his plans. But the murderer has been found, and after the Chamber of Secrets is closed, the basilisk may be trapped in it forever. Hermione did not quite agree with Harry's opinion. I mean, if everyone sees that the attack does not happen again, no one will keep talking about you. But don't forget that Malfoy has already told about the attack at Hogwarts, and if the basilisk is not found, Professor Dumbledore will definitely be in trouble. I mean, you know, Malfoy's father is not only a pure-blood wizard family, but also a Hogwarts school trustee, and he has been trying to fire Dumbledore because of his closeness to Muggles. Hogwarts was going to be in big trouble. Harry explained his reasons. But the heir to the Chamber of Secrets has been captured, right? We all know that it's the diary. Hermione looked around, and when no one was paying attention, she whispered back. But Dumbledore isn't going to announce it, is he? Harry suddenly found a very valid reason. Well, maybe we do find the entrance to the Chamber of Secrets, find the basilisk. Hermione opened her mouth, but finally agreed with Harry. Don't worry, at least we don't have to worry about anyone being attacked again. Seeing that the entrance to the secret room was still to be found, Ron suddenly became interested. Ron's right, we won't be in any danger. Harry said, don't forget, Professor Eisen gave us the sunglasses and snoring recorder. We don't have to worry at all. In the following time, although the atmosphere in the school was still depressed, as time went by, since Justin and nearly headless Nick were attacked, when there was no more attack, people's emotions were in the calming crystal. Under the influence of the ball, he gradually became optimistic. The book chasing app recommended to me by an old book friend who has known me for 10 years, Yegwa Reading. It's really easy to use. I rely on reading and listening to books to pass the time while driving and before going to bed. You can download Yegwa here. However, Peeves, the ghost of Hogwarts, has been making trouble in the corridors. He will always squeeze in the crowd, dancing a regular dance and singing, "Oh, Potter, you bastard." Of course, seeing that the attacks tended to subside, Lockhart, a professor who likes to show off, took all the credit for himself. I don't think there's going to be any more trouble, Minerva. I don't think the chamber will ever open this time. Those criminals must already know that sooner or later I'll catch them. It's only a matter of time. See, before I get out when dealing with them, it is very wise to stop. You know, what the school needs most right now is a morale boost, and it's very necessary to erase the memories of last semester. I think I'm pretty sure about this sort of thing, but I can't reveal it just yet. This is what the little wizards heard Lockhart say to Professor McGonagall during their transfiguration class. Everyone didn't believe Lockhart's words, especially Harry and Ron, who knew the truth and directly regarded him as a complete liar. Even Hermione was basically completely disappointed in Lockhart. In the early morning of February 14th, when Eisen came to the auditorium to have breakfast, he was astonished by the scene before him like many little wizards. After entering the gate of the auditorium, one after another red flowers are arranged on the four walls, which look extraordinarily bright and dazzling under the effect of magic. In addition, what is more eye-catching is that the ceiling was enchanted at some point, and heart-shaped confetti kept falling from the ceiling, sprinkled on the long dining table and the floor. Sitting at the professor's table, Eisen saw Lockhart's attire. He was dressed in pink wizard robes, which matched the color of the surrounding decorations. This looks like a plot person? Thinking of this, Eisen glanced at the faces of the professors. All the teachers were stern, and Professor McGonagall's cheek muscles protruded, as if they were about to explode. As for Professor Snape, Eisen noticed that his expression was not very good, as if someone had been poured a glass of strong drink. Looking across the dining tables of the various colleges, the faces of those students were either darkened or dazed. Basically, there was not much difference. Of course, there are also some little wizards with smirks on their faces, who seemed to like Lockhart's tricks. Happy Valentine's Day, everyone! Lockhart stood up and waved his hand to quiet everyone, and then said loudly, but he didn't stop, because then came his acting moment. So far, 45 people have sent me greeting cards, and I want to thank you for that. Yes, please forgive my self-assertion. For everyone a little surprise has been arranged. Of course it's more than that. After the words fell, Lockhart clapped his hands. As if at a signal, at Lockhart's motion, 12 sullen-faced short men strode in through the doors leading to the hall. Perhaps it was Lockhart's arrangement. These dwarfs not only had golden wings on their backs, but also harps on their backs. Looking at all this, the corners of Eisen's mouth twitched. He didn't know what kind of psychology Lockhart was, but he just felt embarrassed watching it all. However, Lockhart ignored everyone else's faces and continued to wave to everyone beamingly. My friendly little cupids with greeting cards. They will be wandering around the school today and hand you Valentine's Day cards. The fun doesn't stop there. Believe me, why not ask Professor Snape to teach you how to make ecstasy? Professor Flitwick is more proficient at enchanting magic than any wizard I've ever met, that cunning old dog. F***K. Awesome. Eisen suppressed a smile, his face contorted, and he could see Professor Flitwick burying his face in his hands. And Professor Snape had a gloomy expression on his face. It seemed that anyone who really wanted to ask him for advice would probably be poisoned directly. Of course, there is also Professor Eisen. I think he will be happy to teach you how to identify the stars in the night. It's just on the highest astronomical tower. It's so romantic. Upon hearing this sentence, Eisen's distorted face froze. He turned his head and glanced at Lockhart, only to see that the other party was also looking at him, and winked, as if hinting at something. This immediately made Eisen speechless. Isn't it just a tie with you in the duel club? As for this? At that moment, Eisen lowered his head calmly and ate the bread rolls and eggs. Of course, I have to say that Lockhart's campaign to encourage people to express love has changed the atmosphere of the whole school a little bit. To say it really boosted morale, it's not necessarily true. But this whole day is definitely a torture for all the teachers. The students were a little more relaxed in class, because those short boys pretending to be cupids kept breaking into the classroom to deliver Valentine's Day cards, making everyone very depressed. Of course, if one were to choose the most depressed person on this day, Eisen would think it should be Mr. Harry Potter, the savior. Because in order to prevent Harry from escaping, the dwarf pretending to be Venus put his hands on his knees and threw him heavily to the ground. If it was just that, it was nothing, but to Harry's embarrassment, the shorty sang him a Valentine's Day gift with vocals in front of almost all the first-year students. Of course, the singing voice is generally more interesting. His eyes are as green as a freshly pickled toad. He is as black and handsome as the night. I hope he is mine. He is really handsome, a warrior who conquered the Dark Lord. When the shorty sang this Valentine's Day gift with singing, everyone laughed. In the next few days, Harry's green toad-like eyes had spread among the students. Especially Fred and George, wishing to sing this kind of Valentine's Day greeting with singing in Harry's ear over and over again every day, which made Harry simply unbearable. Chapter 48 Dumbledore's Preparations. Please subscribe. Lockhart's performance on Valentine's Day was like an episode, and it caused some waves in the first few days, but as time went by, the little wizards had to focus on their studies. Days passed, and soon it was March. For Eisen, these days have not had much ups and downs, but for the school's professors, they ushered in a piece of good news. That is, the Mandela grass under the care of Professor Sprout is about to mature. This also means that those who were attacked and slept stiffly on the hospital bed will soon be revived. During the Easter break, second-year students also encountered a major event, which was to choose electives to study in preparation for third-year courses. In addition to the original 7 courses to be studied, elective courses include ancient runes, arithmetic and divination, protection of magical creatures, divination, and Muggle studies. While the trio was studying the list of new courses, Eisen came to Dumbledore's office. The walls around the headmaster's office are hung with portraits of successive Hogwarts professors, which still look so conspicuous. Eisen noticed that Fox, who had been Nirvana before, had grown a bit. Professor Dumbledore, did you come here for something? Looking at Dumbledore sitting behind the desk, Eisen wondered why he came to him. Yes, Professor Eisen, I have something to tell you. Dumbledore nodded and said the matter slowly. You mean you want me to watch Harry and the others at school so that they don't come into danger? Eisen said, but showed doubts. Yes, you know, Gryffindor students, in addition to being brave, always like to take risks. Saying this, Dumbledore smiled. But then, his expression became serious. However, the basilisk is still roaming around Hogwarts Castle, although it is not controlled by Tom's Horcrux, but Harry is a crapdun. So, if Harry accidentally opens the entrance to the Chamber of Secrets with the snake tongue, it will be a very dangerous thing for Harry and the whole of Hogwarts. Eisen took Dumbledore's words, feeling rather worried for exclamation. Perhaps, after Eisen intentionally or unintentionally reminded, Dumbledore already knew that Harry was Voldemort's Horcrux. That's right, Harry and the others are still second-year students. They don't have enough ability to protect themselves in danger, Dumbledore said, looking at Eisen in a daze. Okay, I'll watch Harry and the others. Eisen gave an affirmative remark, but then looked at Dumbledore later. But Dumbledore doesn't need me to come here and say this. I have some bad premonition. Dumbledore's eyes flashed with worry, and he handed Eisen a newspaper. Eisen took it and found that it was a copy of the Daily Prophet with an article called Dumbledore's Mistakes. After reading the content of the article, let Eisen directly call Good Guy. The eccentric Albus Dumbledore, headmaster of Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, has always been a controversial wizard, our special correspondent Rita Skeeter reports. As the greatest wizard recognized by the wizarding world, Dumbledore became famous for defeating the dark wizard Grindelwald in 1945. But is Dumbledore really that great? The author recently received letters from parents of some students, claiming that appalling attacks occurred in schools. For this matter, Dumbledore not only failed to find the murderer, but also allowed the attacks to happen many times. Even, the headmaster blocked the news. After reading this article, a word popped up in Eisen's mind involuntarily, that is talent. If he didn't know what kind of person Rita Skeeter, a reporter from the Daily Prophet, was, Eisen would have believed the content of this article. Because although the angle of this article is very strange, it really looks like that. I don't think what's written on it is true. Eisen looked up at Dumbledore, giving him a look of firm trust. If it's what you said, Malfoy gave the Horcrux to the little wizard to bring into Hogwarts, then he will definitely not miss this opportunity. Dumbledore pointed to the newspaper in Eisen's hand. Although he didn't make it clear, but Eisen understood what Dumbledore meant. Obviously, Lucius Malfoy, as the master of the pure-blood wizard family, has always respected the theory of pure blood, but Dumbledore, the headmaster, is close to Muggles. So he will definitely find a chance to fire Dumbledore. In the past, after all, Dumbledore was a formidable figure who could fight against and defeat 2 generations of Dark Lords by himself. If there was no fault, other Hogwarts school board members would definitely not agree to dismiss Dumbledore. But since the attack was caught, Dumbledore might actually be fired. Besides, it seems that in the original plot, Dumbledore was deposed for this reason. So, you mean that Lucius Malfoy will join forces with other school trustees to take the attack at Hogwarts as an opportunity to drive you out of Hogwarts? Eisen followed Dumbledore's meaning. He's definitely going to do it, and is already doing it. Dumbledore nodded. It seemed that Dumbledore already knew about some of Lucius Malfoy's tricks. But I think, as long as we tell the real culprit of the attack and the Horcrux, there will be no problem. Eisen hesitated, and then proposed a solution to the problem. No, the matter of the Horcruxes is of great importance, and cannot be leaked out easily. Dumbledore spoke in a firm tone. Do you think the news that Voldemort was not killed should not be announced? Or are you worried that some people will not be able to resist the temptation to make Horcruxes? Eisen showed a thoughtful expression. That's right, Malfoy used to be a Death Eater. I'm not sure what his attitude towards Voldemort is now, so I must never let him know about the Horcruxes. Dumbledore said, taking a deep look at Eisen, and other people are not like you, who will not waver in the face of the Philosopher's Stone, which is more perfect than Horcruxes and can make people immortal. Nodding his head, Eisen didn't speak, but there was a look of embarrassment on his face. It was Dumbledore not knowing about his gold finger, otherwise he would never have said so. So, Professor Dumbledore, what are your plans next? Are you going to find Voldemort's other Horcruxes? After a moment of silence, Eisen opened up the topic. I need to look up Tom's experiences over the years. Maybe I can find some clues. Dumbledore nodded. In other words, currently the best app for reading and listening to books, Yegwa Reading, Yegwa do install the latest version. Will Voldemort put some protective magic or jinx on the Horcruxes he made? Eisen raised this question appropriately. I can feel that there is a powerful black magic in his diary, which seems to be able to absorb and it communicates the human vitality. You're right, it's definitely in his character to do that. Dumbledore nodded approvingly, admiring Eisen's caution. Is that so? Eisen nodded, and then took out the healing bracelet that he made some time ago. It's a prop I made with unicorn hair. It can resist a certain degree of curses and curses. I think you can useful. I mean, while you're the greatest wizard of our time, I don't think you'd say no to it, would you? In anticipation that Dumbledore might seek out Voldemort's other Horcruxes, Eisen has been tweaking the healing bracelet recently, making its ability to counteract jinxes and curses greatly enhanced. The purpose of Eisen's doing this, of course, is to change the plot of Dumbledore being directly disabled after finding Marvolo Gaunt's ring directly. Although Eisen had also thought about finding the ring directly before giving it to Dumbledore. But after thinking about it for a long time, I couldn't figure out what reason I used to find this ring. Could it be that he told Dumbledore that he was free to wander around Voldemort's old Gaunt's house, and then found it? Obviously, this is not appropriate. I have to thank you, Eisen. Dumbledore smiled and took the healing bracelet that Eisen handed over, and put it on his wrist directly in front of his face. Great alchemy props, Professor Eisen. You are very good at alchemy. His talent is also very good. Thank you, I think. I still need to work harder. After hearing Dumbledore's praise, Eisen did not feel complacent at all. After all, Eisen knew very well how far his alchemy was from Dumbledore and Nick Flamel. Chapter 49. Dueling Team. When leaving Dumbledore's office, Eisen's mood was not worried because he knew that Dumbledore might leave Hogwarts, but he was relieved to hand over the healing bracelet to Dumbledore. When Eisen came to the library after lunch, he found the trio was there. In the blink of an eye, Eisen had already seen the list of new courses placed on the table by the trio, and the list was marked with a mark. 5 elective courses will be added in the 3rd grade. Have you already selected them? After taking out a copy of Practical Defense Magic and its Restraint Against Black Magic from the bookshelf, Eisen came to the trio. I want to give up potions, class. Harry was listless and seemed unable to cheer up. Yes, I'd like to drop Defense Against the Dark Arts too. Ron looked equally downcast. You can't give up the compulsory courses in the 1st grade. Eisen sat down beside him and knocked on the table. What courses did you choose? I took the same course as Harry, both Divination and Protection of Magical Creatures. Ron showed Eisen the list of marked courses. Why don't you take Muggle Studies? Eisen glanced at the list, then looked at Harry. For you, Muggle Studies should be very easy. This should be your strong point. I think my strong point is flying lessons, but it's not an elective, Harry said with a strange look in his eyes. Obviously, Harry was more interested in Quidditch. In that case, maybe you can consider becoming a professional Quidditch player in the future. Eisen made a little suggestion. That's right, Harry. You are the youngest Seeker in Gryffindor, and becoming a professional Quidditch player is definitely the best choice. As a Quidditch fan, Ron's eyes froze when he thought of Harry walking on the court. Lights up. But electives don't really have much to do with Quidditch, do they? Said Hermione from the sidelines. These words seemed to pour a basin of cold water on the two of them, and Harry and Ron were instantly discouraged. Hermione, have you taken all the courses? Glancing at the course list where Hermione signed all the elective courses, Eisen asked with a surprised expression even though he knew this was the case. Yes, I think it's okay to take these courses, Hermione said confidently. Harry and Ron on the side showed envious expressions. Looking at the confident Hermione in front of him, Eisen was almost dazzled by her brilliance for a moment. Is this the aura of a bully? So scary. By the way, what do you think of the dueling club? As if remembering something, Eisen suddenly looked at the three of them with a meaningful expression. That's too bad. After hearing Eisen's words, Ron suddenly showed a hint of disdain. Like Lockhart's teaching method, I don't think it's possible to learn anything from him except for letting the elves out. That's right, and it hasn't been since Lockhart held the first dueling club meeting, Harry echoed. Recommended, Yegwa reading and chasing books is really easy to use. Download Yegwa Do here, everyone can try it soon. But, at least we learned the disarming charm, didn't we? Hermione on the side looked a little troubled, but she retorted slightly. That's because you learned the disarming charm, we didn't. And in a duel, but the enemy won't bow to you. Ron mentioned this, his expression becoming more and more disdainful. By the way, Professor Eisen, you mentioned the dueling club as, seeing that the two were about to quarrel, Harry quickly looked at Eisen. Hearing Harry's words, Hermione and Ron also stopped the tendency to quarrel and looked at Eisen eagerly. Since you feel that Lockhart's defense against the dark arts class can't learn much, why not form a dueling group similar to a dueling club, and let me teach you how to actually fight? Eisen said his purpose with a smile. Really? Ron looked surprised. That's really good. Professor Eisen, are you going to teach us actual combat? Harry also showed a look of surprise. You know, although the three of them don't know how strong Eisen's true strength is, judging from the performance of some previous shots, they are definitely not comparable to Lockhart. Professor Eisen, are we the only ones in this dueling team? When will it start? Hermione asked impatiently. That's right, I think the three of you are too adventurous, so it's necessary to teach you some self-defense methods. Seeing the three of them staring at him eagerly, Eisen nodded and said with a hint of teasing. When the three of them heard this, they all showed embarrassing expressions when they recalled what they had done since they entered school. As for the time, what do you think about every night from 8:30 to 9 o'clock? Eisen said, looking at the three of them. Then it's a deal. Ron spoke first, looking genuinely interested in the matter. Hermione on the side nodded and didn't speak, just looked at Eisen and smiled silly. I'm going to Woods for Quidditch training after dinner, but it's over at 8 o'clock. I don't think it's a problem between 8:30 and 9 o'clock, Harry said, although equally happy, but somewhat tangled. Because in this way, there is almost no time for Harry to arrange freely. By the way, Professor Eisen, since we are going to practice actual combat, where are we going to do it? It can't be in the auditorium, right? Suddenly, Harry seemed to think of something and asked this question. Ron on the side was also stunned for a moment. If the actual combat practice was really held in the auditorium, then the matter of the dueling team would definitely be exposed. Don't worry, I'll find a secret place, and no one will know about it. Eisen pondered for a while, then remembered the room of requirement, and then gave the three of them a mysterious smile. At 8 o'clock in the evening in the Gryffindor common room, wait for me. I will find you. The room of requirement. If there were no accidents, Harry and the others would have to wait a long time to get in. But since he wants to train a trio right now, the room of requirement is a good choice. As for whether the dueling team formed will be discovered, Eisen said that as long as they are cautious, there will be no problem. Besides, even if the matter is exposed and other people know about it, Eisen doesn't think it's a big deal. After all, Lockhart was the first to host the dueling club, and by then Eisen could say he got the inspiration from Lockhart for forming dueling groups to train the trio. That way, Eisen's behavior doesn't come across as too abrupt. Anyway, there have been several attacks at Hogwarts, so Eisen's actions seem entirely plausible. Of course, the most crucial point is that Dumbledore personally confessed to him, asking him to protect Harry and the others. Then Eisen taught them how to fight and how to protect themselves. Wouldn't it be the most effective means of protection? Therefore, it is logical for Eisen to form this dueling team. As for what kind of master the trio can be trained into, Eisen is really not sure at the moment. After all, the age of the three of them was there. But Eisen thinks that after his own teaching and training, their actual combat ability can always be increased, which is enough. Chapter 50 The Progress of Transfiguration, for subscription. At 8:20 that night, Eisen came to the Gryffindor common room. Before entering, Eisen had already seen their figures from the perspective of God. The three sat quietly in armchairs around the fireplace, whispering constantly, as if they were discussing something. There was a trace of fatigue on Harry's face, but his spirit was exceptionally excited. It seemed that although the Quidditch training made him a little tired, he was looking forward to the next duel training. Honey Eaters. Through the password, Eisen successfully passed the portrait of the fat lady. Professor Eisen. Seeing Eisen coming, the trio's eyes lit up. They all got up from the armchairs and came to Eisen's side. Huh, is Professor Eisen here for something? On the other side, Fred and George, who were sitting on the sofa and discussing something constantly, saw Eisen coming and asked happily. That's right, I'm going to take them to confinement. Eisen had a half-smile on his face. If you want to go too, I'd be happy to take you there. How about it? Oh no, George and I are still busy. There are still a few products that can be sold in the magic trick shop, right, George? Hearing Eisen's words, Fred waved his hand immediately and quickly found an excuse to say goodbye. George gestured. That's right, Professor Eisen. This is the gadget we just made. It's very interesting. George tacitly took out a very attractive-looking custard biscuit from his pocket. Oh, what's the use of it? Eisen took the biscuit. Judging from its appearance, it was indeed very tempting. If Eisen hadn't already eaten, he also had the desire to stuff it into his mouth and eat it. Haha, it's very useful. Hearing Eisen's question, Fred suddenly became interested. Not only can it fill your stomach, but it can also help wizards practice animagus. That's right, with it, it will be much easier for wizards to learn how to transform the human body. George winked at Fred and agreed with a smile. Can help practice animags? When did Wesley's twin brothers reach this level? For a moment, Eisen was a little stunned. However, seeing the weird smiles of the two, Eisen immediately understood that this was another prank on their part. So, this is canary custard biscuits? Eisen knew from the back of his memory what kind of prank prop this was. So, are they able to make canary custard biscuits at this time? However, when thinking of the effect of the canary custard biscuits, Eisen suddenly felt that the Wesley twin brothers' talents were terrifyingly high. You know, the effect of the canary custard biscuit is that it can turn the person who eats him into a large canary with feathers. In other words, currently the best app for reading and listening to books, Yegwa Reading, Yegwa do install the latest version. Although its effect is only for 5 seconds, the person who eats it after 5 seconds will automatically change back to its original shape. But the effect of these 5 seconds is the real human body deformation field. If the duration of the effect of this canary custard biscuit can be controlled at will, then this is simply a replica of animagus. You must know that animagus is a profound skill in transfiguration. To learn it, not only must you study transfiguration in depth, but you must also follow the complicated steps step by step. As a result, it's astounding that Fred and George were able to develop something like the canary custard biscuit. Can I try it? With these thoughts in mind, Eisen couldn't wait to experience how far it could transform. So he gestured to Fred and George with the biscuit. Ah, This is unnecessary. Fred was stunned for a moment. Yes, it's a prank product, George quickly explained. But the smiling expression on Eisen's face did not change at all, and he ate the custard biscuit directly. Then, under the terrified eyes of Fred, George, and the trio, Professor Eisen's body was covered with feathers instantly, turning into a large canary. The magic power in Eisen's body surged slightly, and he focused his mind to feel the subtle changes in his body. Discovery is indeed the category of human body deformation. After turning into a large canary, Eisen flapped his wings. The theory of human body deformation that he learned some time ago, because he wanted to create the invisible phantom, flooded into his mind. In the final analysis, although human body transformation is a profound skill of transfiguration, in fact, the essence of magical power still has to be closer to idealism. For example, when the conversion spell in transfiguration, when converting the properties of two substances, does he still need to have a deep understanding of the properties of the two substances? Of course not. He only needs to have this kind of willingness when casting the conversion spell, and the magic will automatically help him realize the conversion of characteristics. Similarly, if he uses transfiguration to turn paper into an alloy, does he still need to know the composition or atomic arrangement of the alloy? Obviously not needed. As long as he has this will when casting spells, the magic power in his body will help him realize all this. If so, Eisen can understand why Fred and George can make canary custard biscuits. Perhaps, when they made these prank props, their strong enough will accounted for a large part. 5 seconds later, Eisen's body returned to its original state. But to Fred and George's surprise, instead of being angry, he smiled. Professor Eisen? Hermione looked at Eisen worriedly. Harry and Ron also looked at Eisen with the same expression, as if they were worried if something happened to him. Don't worry, I'm fine. After reassuring the trio, Eisen focused on Fred and George. It's a very good prop. It can really help people practice body transformation. Ah? Seeing that Eisen was not angry and had just smiled, Fred and George were stunned when they heard such an answer. Afterwards, the two looked at each other, and they could see the doubt in each other's eyes. Isn't this a prank? Professor Eisen, Professor McGonagall said that human body transformation is a very difficult skill in transfiguration. The thing they made can help people practice human body transformation? Ron on the side couldn't help but ask. Living with Fred and George since he was a child, Ron knew what kind of people these two big brothers were, so he didn't believe that they would make any serious stuff at all. It's helpful for me, but for you, it might just be a prank. Eisen pondered for a moment and gave an answer that discouraged them. Truth be told, Fred and George inspired Eisen a lot this time around with their canary custard biscuits. Now, Eisen has a feeling that his transfiguration will take a step forward. A flash of joy flashed in his heart, and after turning this thought in his mind, Eisen opened the god's perspective and pulled his gaze directly over Hogwarts Castle. The pitch-black night couldn't block Eisen's sight. With the flash of Eisen's thought, a pool of clear water flashed in the air, then changed shape and turned into cloud, then turned into flame, lightning, and finally turned into water mist and dissipated. Previously, although Eisen was able to achieve such changes, most of his energy was focused on the control of skills and magic power. But now, Eisen paid more attention to the will, only to find that the use of transfiguration was much smoother. Even the control power has been directly improved by a large amount. The smile spread from the corner of his mouth, and Eisen knew that, if nothing unexpected, not only his transfiguration level had improved a lot, even all his enchantment levels will be improved. Professor Eisen, Hermione's voice sounded. Turning his gaze and withdrawing his thoughts, Eisen noticed that several people had calmed down and were looking at him. Come on, come with me. After gesturing to Fred and George, Eisen beckoned the trio to leave the Gryffindor common room and walk towards their destination. Chapter 51 The First Training, for subscription. After coming out of the fat lady's portrait hole, Eisen noticed that the 3 people following him were in high spirits. Walking through the long corridor, after a few minutes, Eisen has come to the opposite of the tapestry of Barnabas with the troll stick. The trio following Eisen couldn't help being stunned when they saw that Eisen suddenly stopped in the open space of the corridor but didn't find any room. Professor Eisen, why did you stop here? Harry asked, and Hermione and Ron also looked at Eisen with questioning expressions. Remember this, Eisen pointed to the troll stick on the wall and the Barnabas tapestry. The 3 looked puzzled, and saw several giant monsters beating the silly Barnabas who was trying to teach them how to dance ballet. Perhaps because of being watched by several people, the troll stopped beating and began to turn his head to watch several people. Is that weird? Hermione asked the same question Harry and Ron wanted to ask. Ahem, a while ago I accidentally discovered that there is a hidden room here. After looking around for no one, Eisen coughed softly and pointed to the opposite side of the tapestry. The 3 of them looked in the direction Eisen was pointing at, and saw that there was a smooth wall without the slightest abnormality. It's just opposite the tapestry. If you need a certain venue, walk through that section of the wall 3 times, and a door will appear on the wall. Behind the door is the venue you need. Without waiting for the three to ask again, Eisen then he said the answer directly. Hermione stomped over and patted the wall, but still didn't find anything unusual, and immediately showed a surprised expression. We're looking for a place to practice spells, so come and see me demonstrate. Beckoning to the three, Eisen stepped aside. In the trio's view, Professor Eisen muttered, I need a place to practice my spells, and walked back and forth in front of that section of the wall 3 times. Then, something that surprised them happened. Even though Eisen had been told in advance that there was a hidden room there, they still showed disbelief when a clean door appeared on that section of the wall. Wow, that's really cool, Ron said in a surprised tone as he touched the door with his hand. Professor Eisen, could this be the entrance to Slytherin's Chamber of Secrets? Looking at what happened before him, Harry remembered the Chamber of Secrets that had troubled them for a long time. After hearing Harry's words, Ron and Hermione flinched involuntarily, stepped back several steps at once, and looked at Eisen hastily. Of course it's not Slytherin's Chamber of Secrets. I've been in it several times, and there's no danger in it. Hearing Harry's words, Eisen couldn't help rolling his eyes. Let's go. After speaking, Eisen opened the door first and walked in. The 3 of them smiled and followed behind. After entering inside, an empty field appeared in front of several people. There are several brackets placed on the edge of the field, and there are several human-shaped puppets beside the brackets, which seem to be used for people to practice spells. Professor Eisen, what is this place? Looking at the empty room in front of him, Harry couldn't help asking. The response room, I think, can meet our requirements here, Eisen said as he took out his wand. Okay, before starting the training and actual combat, I must say a few things. Eisen looked very calmly. First, the dueling etiquette that Professor Lockhart taught you at the dueling club meeting. I think you need to forget it. Ron is right about this. When he is fighting the enemy, he will not fight with you. Bow. Seeing the thoughtful expressions of the 3 of them, Eisen paused slightly, and then said, Second, if you want to protect yourself in case of danger, I think you need to learn a few attack spells and defensive spells. Not those little jinxes that go around among students. The 3 of them didn't speak, and Eisen nodded in satisfaction. As for the third one, I think you should understand that on-the-spot reaction is also part of actual combat, and you should experience this in the next training. After they digested the information of what Eisen said, Eisen nodded and continued. Although Hogwarts School does not pay much attention to dueling and teaching various forms of martial arts magic like Durmstrang, but in fact, a lot of content is included in the Defense Against the Dark Arts class. However, I think you have been studying for almost 2 years, and you should know what the school's Defense Against the Dark Arts class is like. Because of the scheduling problem or the professor's own problem, this course is almost useless. So the next learning content, in addition to learning some spells, will be more biased towards actual combat. Then, let me see your strength next, Eisen said and stepped aside, giving the venue to the 3 of them. Professor, you mean, let's? Seeing Eisen so straightforward, Harry pointed at Hermione and Ron, and then pointed at himself, with a dazed look on his face. That's right, the 3 of you started fighting. Let me see how strong you are. No matter what spell you use, as long as you can defeat each other, Eisen said, raising a square stone platform with a wave of his wand. Harry and Hermione, you 2 go first. After hearing Eisen's words, Ron immediately backed away and came to Eisen's side, looking at the 2 people on the stage with great interest. Harry and Hermione drew their respective wands, then looked at Eisen in the stands, then stared at each other. Start. Eisen gave the order. Tarantella dance. After hearing Eisen's order, Harry took the lead and uttered a small curse. But to everyone's surprise, Hermione moved away and almost at the same time, cast a petrification spell on Harry. Total petrification. Accompanied by the voice, Harry frantically waved his wand to resist, but because he hadn't learned the defensive spell, Harry was hit by the spell, and then his body stiffened and fell straight on the stage. After undoing the petrified Harry with the uncurse, Eisen made Harry and Hermione fight Ron again. As a result, due to the damage of Ron's wand, 2 battles and 2 losses were lost, which was unbearable to look at. Since they are all still in the 2nd grade, Hermione, the top student, is the strongest among the 3. At first glance, it seems a bit outrageous, but when you think about it carefully, it makes sense. After all, Harry, the savior, hadn't learned a few spells yet, so it was normal that he couldn't beat Hermione. But why didn't Hermione hit Millicent at the dueling club meeting? Could it be that the opponent's size is too intimidating to overwhelm Hermione? Shaking his head, Eisen restrained his divergent thoughts. Seeing Hermione with a happy face, and Ron and Harry with slightly disappointed expressions, Eisen said, Okay, I already know your strength. The spell I'm going to teach you next is the Disarming Curse. The eyes of the 3 of them lit up, and they immediately became interested. I think that at the first meeting of the dueling club, Professor Snape showed you what this spell can do. It can not only remove the opponent's wand, but also knock the opponent into the air. Of course, more importantly, this spell, the danger of the spell is quite low, but the practicality is very high. More than that, this spell is quite simple to learn, No matter where you practice it daily, there is no problem. All right, let me demonstrate it to you. As Eisen said, with a wave of his wand, the puppet at the edge of the field flew into the air and flew to the center of the field. Listen to the pronunciation of my incantation and the movement of my wand. Eisen nodded to the three of them, and then raised his wand to aim at the puppet. Expelliarmus! While chanting the incantation, the wand in his hand waved a little and then stabbed out quickly. Then, a blinding red light flew from the tip of Eisen's wand. Recommended, Yegwa reading and chasing books is really easy to use. Download Yegwa here, everyone can try it soon. Like a scorching lightning, it quickly hit the puppet in the center of the field. The puppet was hit and flew to the edge of the field and rolled several times. Flipping the wand again, the puppets on the edge of the field were all summoned by Eisen to the center of the field. Harry, Hermione, practice this spell first. Ron, bring me your wand and have a look. After ordering Harry and Hermione, Eisen held out his hand to Ron. Chapter 52 failed to repair the wand. Subscribe. Disarm you. Disarm you. Harry's and Hermione's voices followed. The two of them had one target each and began to practice casting the disarming curse. Since Hermione had already learned the disarming charm, every cast went very smoothly. As for Ron, he gave Eisen his wand, damaged and covered in duct tape. Professor, can you fix it? Glancing at Harry and Hermione who were practicing spells on the stage, Ron showed envy on his face and then looked at Eisen expectantly. I'm not sure. Eisen shook his head. Seeing that the expectation on Ron's face turned into disappointment, he continued, however, I think I can give it a try. Looking at the broken wand in his hand, the corners of Eisen's mouth couldn't help twitching. How to say? From the wand used by Ron, it can be seen that the financial conditions of the Weasley family are indeed not very good. You know, little wizards have to buy their own wand when they enter school, but Ron uses the old wand used by his big brother Charlie. Even if the wand wasn't damaged, the unicorn hair on its tail was exposed. The wand, which nearly broke in two, was held together by Ron with duct tape. It looks like it was patched together, but it doesn't really work at all. Judging from the result of Ron casting a spell on Malfoy but being bounced back, something has gone wrong with this wand. Therefore, the wand problem had to be solved if Ron was going to have combat training. Holding Ron's wand in his hand, he could feel that the magic power was running extremely jerky, especially at the break, as if blocked, unable to form a complete backflow. The streamer in the eyes flickered, and after turning on the observation feature, the angle of view quickly zoomed in towards the magic wand in his hand. Immediately, the material and texture of ash wood came into Eisen's mind clearly, and the unicorn hair inlaid in it was also clearly seen by him. The wand made of ash wood is engraved with a series of textures, and the key nodes are connected one by unicorn hair, which seems to play a role in penetrating the magic power. But at the break, you can see that some textures are broken and some nodes are blocked. This made the wand useless as it should be. Can it be repaired like this? Eisen had this thought in his mind, but felt that the possibility was very low. If Eisen remembers correctly, if the wand is so badly damaged that it is about to break in two, there is basically no spell or method that can repair it, not even the master wand maker Ollivander. But strangely, there is one exception, and that is the Elder Wand. There are records in the original book of Dumbledore restoring Hagrid's wand and Harry using the Elder Wand to restore his own. But when asked what the reason was, Eisen couldn't figure it out, so he could only blame it on the special features of the Elder Wand. With a thought, the broken part of the wand was reunited under the effect of Eisen's transfiguration. Then, a flash of light flickered in Eisen's hand, and it got into the wand and walked along the texture inside. A moment later, Ron's wand had become an intact wand. Even the unicorn hair emerging from the tail was re-embedded into the interior of the wand by Eisen. Professor Eisen, Ron looked at the intact wand in Eisen's hand, and suddenly exclaimed in surprise, did you really fix the wand? After hearing Ron's voice, Eisen glanced at him, but frowned slightly. Holding the wand that has been repaired in his hand, but feeling it carefully, Eisen can find that the operation of magic power is still extremely jerky. It's similar to the feeling when the wand is broken. Although it can be a little better, but if you feel it carefully, you can find that it's not much better. Such a result made Eisen feel a little embarrassed. However, after thinking about it, he was relieved again. You know, Eisen has no understanding of wand making. Even Ollivander, a master wand maker, can't repair a badly damaged wand. It's normal that he can't repair it. No, I don't think this can be said to be fixed. You can try it and attack me. Eisen shook his head and handed Ron his wand. Professor? Ron held his wand, and when he heard Eisen's words, his face suddenly changed. It's okay, let's try it and see if the wand works. Eisen took out his wand, nodded to Ron, and signaled him not to worry too much. Eating slugs, Ron muttered aloud, pointing his wand at Eisen. The corners of Eisen's mouth twitched at Ron's incantation. It's just a try. It's too much to use such a crazy spell. Armor protection, just as Ron was chanting, Eisen neatly cast a line of armor between the two of them as a barrier. However, what Eisen didn't expect was that things didn't go as he thought. Ron's spell was blocked by the iron armor curse and bounced to the other side. Rather, Ron's wand backfired before the spell could be cast. So, Eisen froze for a moment, and Ron's spell hit him. Boom! A boom exploded in the response room, and then Ron was sent flying into the air, took a few steps back, and then fell to the ground. Professor Eisen, Hermione, and Harry on the side were startled. They stopped practicing the disarming charm and came to Eisen's side. The book-chasing app recommended to me by an old book friend who has known me for 10 years. Yegwo reading. It's really easy to use. I rely on reading and listening to books to pass the time while driving and before going to bed. You can download Yegwo here. What's wrong with Ron? Harry stepped forward to help Ron, who fell to the ground, and asked Eisen. It was just an accident. Eisen spread his hands, and then said the matter again. Ouch! Ron opened his mouth to say something, but spat out a slug. After that, he looked at Eisen even more pitifully, as if complaining why he didn't fix his wand. Okay, let me try it. Stepping up to Harry, Eisen pointed his wand at Ron. Since Eisen happened to read the book, Practical Defense Magic and its Restraint to Black Magic, recently, Eisen happened to think that a curse-breaking spell in it could solve Ron's problem. Although the curse-breaking curse itself is a curse, its effect is very intuitive, that is, to counteract the effect of the curse. A stream of light shot out from the tip of the wand, and after hitting Ron hiccuped, spat out a slug, and took a long breath to recover. If Ron casts a spell before it hits him, Eisen can just cast him an anti-jinx, which will also prevent the jinx from taking effect. But Eisen didn't react in a daze, so now he can only break the curse with a curse. Fortunately, the effect of this spell is not bad. Professor Eisen, what kind of spell is this? Why didn't you cast it on me last time? I vomited for hours that day. Ron, who stopped vomiting, seemed to remember something, and looked at Eisen with resentment. Hermione and Harry were stunned, and also stared at him blankly. You have to know that there are too many strange spells in the wizarding world. Eisen shrugged his shoulders. I only discovered this spell when I was reading a book in the library recently, although it is very useful, but in fact it is still a curse in essence. I didn't know how to do it last time. This spell is really useful. Hermione didn't care much about whether it was a curse or not. She only thought it could counteract the effect of the curse, and felt that it was very useful. Don't worry, I will teach you this spell after a while. Eisen smiled slightly and drew a cake for them. By the way, Hermione, Harry, how is your disarming spell practice? Professor, I'm already proficient at using it. Hermione raised her head, expecting Eisen's evaluation. Great, but keep up the good work. Eisen nodded, showing Hermione admiration. Then, he looked at Harry again. I haven't learned it yet. Harry's expression was a little downcast. Don't worry, this spell is actually not difficult. I believe you will learn it soon. Eisen comforted. He wasn't worried at all about whether Harry could learn the disarming charm. You know, in the original book, Harry basically used the disarming curse from beginning to end in his attack methods, and even used it against Voldemort's killing curse. It can be seen from this that Harry's talent in disarming spells is still very good. Okay, there is still some time. You guys continue to practice the disarming charm. Eisen pondered for a moment, and then handed his wand to Ron. During the dueling team combat training session, you can use my wand first, but I suffice it to say, you'll need to buy a new wand. Thank you, Professor. I will tell my dad. Ron took Eisen's wand with a surprised expression on his face, and then said something solemnly. Chapter 53. A Stalemate Quidditch Match. On the edge of the room of requirement, Eisen sat in an armchair, quietly watching the trio practice the disarming charm on the stone platform. Following the sound of incantations, streaks of red light flew out from the tip of Hermione's wand, hitting the pockmarked puppet, and the tip of Harry's wand flashed red sparks from time to time, and it seemed that he would not be able to learn this spell for a long time. As for Ron, I don't know if the wand is not his fault, so when casting spells, it still has no effect at all. For such a result, Eisen had already expected it. Speaking of which, there is another saying in the wizarding world. That is, when wizards buy wands, they are basically told that not only wizards choose wands, but wands choose wizards. Only when the two are very compatible, the wand will be very smooth to use. This means that if someone else's wand is used to cast a spell, it's not impossible. It can only be said that the casting effect will be very average. It's the same reason Eisen looked for when buying a wand when he first entered the wizarding world. If the wizard has experienced a lot of things and changed his mind a lot, the fit of the wand is likely to drop a lot, and even resist the master to use it to cast spells. At this point, Eisen still feels rather strange. After all, in Eisen's view, if the wand can choose a wizard, it means that the wand is spiritual. But it is obviously unreasonable that a wand with spirituality can be used by other people. Time passed slowly, and half an hour passed quickly, and the time came to 9 o'clock in the evening. Under Eisen's call, the trio's first practical training session ended. After leaving the room of requirement, Eisen retrieved his wand. In the next few days, Eisen spent his spare time reading books in the library in addition to practicing spells. During the day, I would occasionally observe the entire Hogwarts castle through the god's perspective of observing characteristics to see the movement of the trio. In the evening, as usual, the trio was brought to the room of requirement for teaching. Sure enough, Harry was able to successfully cast the disarming curse on the second day, as Eisen expected. As for Ron, I don't know if it's because of his lack of talent, or because he's not used to Eisen's wand. He didn't cast the disarming charm until the fourth day. At 11 o'clock on Saturday morning, the Quidditch pitch was already buzzing with people. It was the second Quidditch match of the season, so it was very important for Harry. When Eisen came to the Quidditch pitch and stepped onto the spectator stand closest to him, loud cheers had already erupted on the field. Beautiful goal. Gryffindor scored another 10 points. The current score is temporarily ahead of Gryffindor, 60-40. Lee Jordan's commentary sounded simultaneously. As soon as the observation feature was turned on, Eisen's line of sight had completely covered the entire stadium. Under Eisen's perception, every detail on the court is visible, and even a breeze cannot escape Eisen's gaze. Perhaps it was because the members of the Hufflepuff team didn't all switch to super brooms like Nimbus 2001 like Slytherin did. So everyone in Gryffindor, including Harry, played relatively easily. Harry flew through the sky at high speed, then turned quickly, then stopped, and then circled at a very high speed, circling east and west, as if he was performing a difficult flying skill. Of course, Hufflepuff's players did not give up lightly. They wore light yellow uniforms and shuttled around the court, biting the score tightly. The little wizards in the spectator stands kept cheering. Whenever either Gryffindor or Hufflepuff scored, it was met with applause from the students of their respective houses. Time passed slowly, and before they knew it, the score between Gryffindor and Hufflepuff had reached 330-300. I don't know if it was bad luck, but the seekers on both sides failed to catch the snitch. Sitting in the stands watching all this, Eisen couldn't help but yawn. Looking at the tired expressions of Gryffindor and Hufflepuff players on the field, Eisen suddenly felt very speechless. At this time, Eisen suddenly discovered that there is a big problem in the Quidditch game, that is, the end of the game. How should I put it? The Quidditch match is about which team's score is higher or lower, but the sign of the end is to catch the golden snitch. After catching the golden snitch, not only can he directly get 150 points, but he can also end the game. But if the golden snitch has not been caught, the game will continue no matter what the score is. It seems that there was a record in the wizarding world. It is said that a Quidditch match lasted for 3 months. In this regard, Eisen was very speechless. That's it, at least it took 3 months to catch the snitch. If he didn't catch the snitch for several years or decades, would the wizard be at odds with a Quidditch match for the rest of his life? It's like the Quidditch match held at Hogwarts. A match really lasts for several months. Can't the class be taught? Evidently, Eisen felt that this regulation was very unreasonable. At the very least, a time limit should be given. For example, a game must end within a day, which is much simpler. When the time came to 2 o'clock in the afternoon, the score between Gryffindor and Hufflepuff had become 540-480. Eisen noticed that the little wizards in the stands of the stadium were already a little languid, and the cheers were almost gone. The book-chasing app recommended to me by an old book friend who has known me for 10 years, Yegwa Reading. It's really easy to use. I rely on reading and listening to books to pass the time while driving and before going to bed. You can download Yegwa here. How long do you think the game will last? I don't know. I hope the game is over soon. I'm hungry. It is said that there was a Quidditch match that lasted as long as 3 months. But Gryffindor and Hufflepuff don't have that many subs. Do you think Cedric and Wood will agree to end the game? Who knows? But Gryffindor is leading now, and Wood probably won't agree. That's really too bad. A few little wizards were whispering listlessly, but the content of the words made Eisen a little speechless. Seeing Harry and other team members sweating profusely on the court, Eisen sighed and turned to leave. It must be said that the Quidditch match is indeed attractive enough to give people an adrenaline rush, but it feels boring when it lasts for a long time. After arriving in the library, Eisen found a place to open Practical Defense Magic and its Restraint to Black Magic, and read it intently. In the evening, when Eisen came to the auditorium, he was surprised to find that some of the little wizards looked extremely hungry, eating their meals, and wished they could stuff all the food into their mouths. Harry, this is, coming to sit down next to Hermione. Eisen pointed to Harry, who was stuffing food into his mouth in embarrassment, and then looked at Hermione and Ron. Poochie. The chicken leg in Ron's hand was hanging in midair, and his face turned red with a smile. They had a match, just finished, because Harry didn't eat at noon, so that's how it looks. Looking at Hermione, who also looked like she wanted to laugh but was embarrassed, it seemed that Harry was really hungry. Oh, Harry caught the snitch? By what score did he win? No, I didn't catch the snitch. It was Wood and Cedric who negotiated to end the match. Harry swallowed a piece of bread, and then said the result, revealing an indescribable loneliness in his tone. It's nothing. In an official Quidditch match, it's normal for one day to last. Just ask Ron. Eisen comforted with a smile. That's right. Some Quidditch matches last for a long time, even for months. Ron took a big bite of the drumstick and then said solemnly, during the period, the substitute players will take turns playing. Looking at this scene, Eisen smiled slightly. Did such a thing happen in the original book? By the way, it should not be. Seems like the game was also cancelled because of an attack. Chapter 54, Emergency. The next day, when Eisen was walking through the corridors of the castle, he realized that yesterday's Quidditch match had spread throughout the school, and everyone was basically talking about it. Some young wizards believe that the rules of the Quidditch game should be modified to set a time for each game. Some little wizards also think that the wonderful thing about the Quidditch game is that there is no time limit. If the time is set, the Quidditch game will not be so attractive. However, just when Eisen thought that the heat of this matter would last for a while, unexpectedly at noon, a piece of news suddenly spread throughout the school. Hagrid was taken away as a suspect in the attack, and Headmaster Dumbledore was forced to leave Hogwarts. Since the murderer of the attack and the fact that Voldemort's Horcrux was found had not been made public, most of the young wizards agreed that Hagrid was the murderer through their associations. But obviously, the truth of the matter is not the case. Professor Eisen, Hagrid has been taken away by the Minister of Magic, Cornelius Fudge, and Headmaster Dumbledore has been deposed. Hermione said anxiously, with a deep uneasiness on her face. Ron stood aside, looking at Eisen with the same worried expression. As I said, Malfoy must have told his father about the attack at the school, and his father will definitely come to the school to make trouble. Harry turned pale. Don't worry, we both know that Hagrid and Professor Dumbledore had nothing to do with the attack. They will be fine. Eisen waved his wand, and a little light fell on several people's heads. That's right, Professor Eisen, they'll be fine. Harry calmed down and nodded. I think that if we can find the entrance to the Chamber of Secrets and find out the basilisk and deal with it, then Hagrid and Dumbledore will definitely come back. Eisen stood up and paced, and after a moment he gave each other a nod. That's what I thought. I said earlier that if the entrance to the Chamber of Secrets is not found, and the problem of the basilisk is not solved, Professor Dumbledore will be in trouble. Harry's eyes lit up, and he immediately expressed his attitude. Where do you think the entrance to the Chamber of Secrets is? Eisen pondered for a moment, then asked directly. Then who knows? Since Hogwarts Castle was built, there have been too many hidden places, and no one has been able to figure out all the secrets. Ron spread his hands, and this question was placed in front of several people again. To be honest, I have been using Yegwa to read and read books recently, changed sources, and read aloud with many timbers. Yegwa Udo Android and Apple are all available. I have read in the library that the size of the basilisk will become very large, and it can live for a long time. Moreover, the basilisk not only has deadly fangs, but also has this deadly stare ability. As long as you talk to it, eye contact kills. Spiders run away when they see a basilisk, for the basilisk is the spider's sworn enemy, and the rooster's crow is deadly to the basilisk. Hermione had apparently looked up all the information about the basilisk in the library. Information. Fortunately, Professor Eisen made a plan in advance. If we want to check the entrance of the secret room, these sunglasses can just protect us. Harry and Ron looked at each other, and took out the enchanted sunglasses that Eisen had given them before, and put them on the eyes. Cool. Ron couldn't help giving a thumbs up as he watched Harry change to wearing sunglasses. Professor Eisen, what do you think? Seeing Harry and Ron's appearance, Hermione put on her sunglasses and looked at Eisen. It feels really good. Seeing the trio wearing sunglasses, Eisen felt very weird for a while, as if the style of painting was completely different. However, although the style is very strange, Eisen feels that it is necessary to give a compliment for the sake of safety. After all, this thing is still provided by oneself. By the way, since the attacks have happened several times, why hasn't anyone seen the basilisk? Harry fiddled with his sunglasses, as if he suddenly remembered something. He took off his sunglasses and asked anxiously. Hermione and Ron looked at Harry with puzzled looks on their faces. Eisen looked at Harry, but nodded thoughtfully. Hermione said the basilisk was huge, and the basilisk would have crawled around if the Chamber of Secrets had been opened. But if a big snake appeared in the castle, someone would have seen it. But no one saw the snake. Strange. Harry saw the expressions of Hermione and Ron, and continued to explain. That's right. Last time we thought so too. The basilisk couldn't be crawling around Hogwarts wearing an invisibility cloak. Ron suddenly realized. In that case, the basilisk must be moving in the pipes of Hogwarts Castle. Hermione crossed her arms, and although she couldn't see her eyes through the sunglasses, she must have guessed that her eyes at this time it must be very bright. No wonder. The voices I've heard several times are all in the walls. Harry clenched the hand holding his sunglasses, showing a look of surprise. Where is the entrance to the Chamber of Secrets? Ron looked uncertain. You have heard the basilisk in Lockhart's office, and you have heard the sound of the basilisk in the corridor, but the entrance to the Chamber of Secrets will definitely not be in the professor's office. Not in the office, not in the hallway. Maybe it's in a bathroom. Eisen raised his mouth slightly, giving a guess. The bathroom? Harry froze for a moment, then exchanged glances with Ron and Hermione. It seemed that a bolt of lightning pierced the night sky, and aura emerged in the minds of the trio at the same time. Moaning Myrtle's bathroom. Hermione's voice snapped. That's right, when the Chamber of Secrets was opened 50 years ago, the basilisk was also released, and it also caused the death of a student. After the crying Myrtle became a ghost, she has always regarded the bathroom as her own territory, which shows that the snake that's where she was killed. Harry followed up with such a guess. Mrs. Norris, Colin, Justin, and nearly Headless Nick were all attacked outside Moaning Myrtle's bathroom, and if the basilisk was hiding in Moaning Myrtle's bathroom, then it's normal that everyone can't find the basilisk, because no one usually goes there, Hermione said, looking at Eisen who was on the side. Pretty reasonable, so we need to go to Moaning Myrtle's bathroom. Eisen nodded slowly. Afterwards, Eisen and the trio walked out of his office, and then walked through the dark corridor to Moaning Myrtle's bathroom. After opening the door and entering, Eisen found Moaning Myrtle sitting in the innermost toilet bowl on the water tank. I know you. You're the professor of astronomy at Hogwarts. The Weeping Myrtle saw a few people and looked directly at Eisen. That's right, I'm the astronomy professor. Eisen nodded, ignored her, and checked the pool in front of her. Are you looking for something? A voice rang in Eisen's ear, and Eisen turned his head to look, only to find the transparent body of the crying Myrtle floating beside him, seeming to be extremely interested in him. Looking at the transparent body of the crying Myrtle, Eisen suddenly had the urge to study it. Speaking of which, ghosts in the wizarding world are a very strange species. Judging from the current situation, ghosts become after the death of wizards who are afraid of death and nostalgic for the world. Like Moaning Myrtle, almost Headless Nick is like this, but Peeves is very special in Hogwarts. Say he is a ghost, but he can have entities and touch objects. Of course, the peculiarity of ghosts also reminded Eisen of Dementors. If you want to say who is more powerful, Dementor or Peeves, it seems that Peeves is better, because Dementors can be dealt with the Patronus charm, but Peeves, who seems to have stayed in Hogwarts for thousands of years, but no one has ever been able to successfully drive it away. For example, in 1876, the then administrator of Hogwarts, Ranko Ross Carlpay, used magic to set a trap, intending to catch Peeves with a bell jar that had been cast with various restraining spells, then drive out of the castle. As a result, Peeves easily blew the bell and left with a few scimitars, some crossbows, a musket, and a small cannon. Afterwards, Peeves started shooting randomly for fun, and the lives of the students were threatened. As a result, Hogwarts Castle had to be evacuated for 3 days. After that, the then headmaster, Professor Eupratia Moore, had to sign an agreement with Peeves, exchanging some privileges for the weapons in his hands. Privileges include giving priority to choosing moldy bread in the kitchen for littering, swimming once a week in the boys' bathroom on the first floor, etc. Of course, Headmaster Eupratia Moore, of course, couldn't compare to Dumbledore. But after all, she's also the headmaster of Hogwarts. But she still has nothing to do with Peeves, which seems a bit outrageous. Professor Eisen. Hermione's voice sounded, with a hint of displeasure in her tone. Eisen collected his thoughts and looked at Hermione aside. Although she was wearing sunglasses, she could still see her general expression. As soon as God's perspective of observing characteristics was opened, the whole bathroom came into Eisen's mind. In an instant, Eisen could clearly see the imprint of a small snake engraved on the side of a faucet above the pool. Chapter 55. Entrance to the Chamber of Secrets. Turning his gaze, Eisen pretended to check carefully, including the water pipes below, and then pointed to the side of the faucet with the snake engraved on it. Look here. Eisen motioned to Hermione. Hermione leaned forward immediately after hearing this, and saw where Eisen was pointing. That's, Hermione's tone revealed surprise. The sign for the entrance to the Chamber of Secrets? Harry, who also saw the snake next to him, had a look of surprise on his face. Ron stepped forward and turned it, but found that the faucet was not coming out. There's never any water coming out of this faucet. The Weeping Myrtle flashed past the crowd, and when she saw Ron's movements, she said happily, obviously, there is a high probability that this is the entrance to the Chamber of Secrets. Eisen nodded, then looked at Harry. Harry, say a few words. Seeing Eisen look at Harry, Ron's eyes lit up, and then he made a move. I mean, you have to say a few words in the old tongue. Harry was a little at a loss. He used to speak the snake's old tongue involuntarily when he was directly facing the snake. Now can you speak the old snake accent directly? Turn on, Harry said, staring at the little snake pattern on the side of the faucet. Then, Harry looked at Ron. No, you're talking human. Ron shook his head. Professor Eisen, what should we do now? Hermione asked Eisen for help. Eisen looked at the trio and saw that they were all looking at him eagerly, so he had an idea in his mind. Immediately, a playing card appeared in his hand, and when he threw it out, it turned into a snake and wrapped around the faucet. Try again. Eisen motioned to Harry. Open. Harry stared at the wriggling snake and made a sound. However, to Eisen and others, what they heard was not human speech, and what came out of his mouth was a strange hissing sound. As Harry's voice fell, the faucet emitted a dazzling white light, and then began to spin rapidly. Then, the pool moved. In other words, currently the best app for reading and listening to books, Yegwa Reading, Yegwa do install the latest version. The pool slowly disappeared from sight, revealing a very thick water pipe, which could allow a person to get in. If you look inside, you will find that this passage is bottomless. Hiss. Hermione and Ron gasped almost simultaneously. Professor, are we going down? Ron glanced deep into the water pipe, and then looked at Eisen in surprise. Where's the basilisk down there? You want to go down? Eisen showed a hint of malice on the corner of his mouth. No, of course not. I mean, we need to inform Professor Lockhart. He's the defense against the dark arts professor, and he'll definitely take care of the basilisk. Ron waved his hand hastily, then pushed Lockhart away with a serious face out. You're right, Ron. You and Harry are going to inform Professor Lockhart to come and deal with the basilisk. Eisen revealed an inexplicable look in his eyes, and then arranged for Ron and Harry. Hearing what Eisen said, Ron breathed a sigh of relief, and after looking at Harry, the two quickly left the abandoned bathroom. Professor, are we waiting here? Hermione glanced at the bottomless pipe, with an eager expression on her face. Ahem, you go to Professor McGonagall and inform her about the things here. I think it's necessary to tell her about the things here. Seeing this, Eisen directly assigned a task to Hermione. After the three of them left, Eisen quietly looked at the water pipe in front of him. The darkness seemed to lead to hell. However, when it comes to Hogwarts plumbing, Eisen finds something very strange. That's why so many pipes were built when Hogwarts was founded. It wouldn't make sense to say that it was left behind by the sewage of the entire castle, because whether it is the cleaning spell or the disappearing spell, it can directly deal with garbage. As for the activity space reserved exclusively for the basilisk, Eisen felt that it was too outrageous. But Hogwarts has left so many intricate pipelines, giving people the feeling that it is not a magical castle, but an ordinary castle. Usually Eisen didn't think about it, but the more he thought about it now, the more strange he felt. The sound of footsteps outside broke Eisen's thoughts. Professor Eisen, after entering the bathroom, Professor McGonagall saw the unfathomable water pipe at a glance, and also saw Eisen standing aside. Professor McGonagall. Eisen nodded, seeing that besides Professor McGonagall, Snape, the potions professor, also came over. Looking at everything in front of him, Professor McGonagall's expression became serious. Hermione, Harry, and Ron deduced from the location of the 3 previous attacks that the entrance to the Chamber of Secrets is in this bathroom. I followed them here and found out that Harry's snake cavity had indeed opened a passage. I think this is very likely to be the entrance to the Chamber of Secrets, so I asked Hermione to notify you. Eisen did not hesitate, looked at Hermione next to him, and briefly explained the matter. Professor Eisen, why did Potter and the others investigate the entrance of the Chamber of Secrets privately? You know, the basilisk is a very dangerous animal, Snape said expressionlessly. Gryffindor students always like to take risks, don't they? Besides, since Harry's old tongue was exposed, everyone regarded him as the heir to the Chamber of Secrets. Although Hagrid was taken away, Harry didn't think Hagrid was the murderer. So of course we need to find out where the entrance to the chamber is. Eisen hesitated for a moment, making a lame excuse. What about after finding out the entrance to the Chamber of Secrets? So he can deal with the basilisk? Snape had a slight sneer on his face. Come on this way. Okay, I see. Harry's voice and Lockhart's voice came, and there were footsteps outside at the same time. Of course I know that second-year wizards can't deal with basilisks. No. Here comes someone who can deal with basilisks, Lockhart, and he's about to show his moment of glory. Eisen smiled at Snape, then pointed to the bathroom door. Following Eisen's movements, Lockhart in aqua-green wizard robes came in, followed by Harry and Ron. It's just that Lockhart seemed to be threatened by the two of them. After entering the bathroom and seeing Eisen and others, his face was slightly embarrassed. As for Harry and Ron, they hastily retracted the wands that were pointed at Lockhart. Let me just say, the entrance to the Chamber of Secrets must be here, and I can easily deal with the basilisk inside. Lockhart smiled when he saw that Harry and Ron had retracted their wands, and while speaking to everyone, he came to looking in from the edge of the water pipe. Yes, Professor Eisen was right. Professor Lockhart said it was a pity that he didn't get to fight the basilisk before Hagrid was captured, and that things were such a mess that they should have been left to you in the first place. Now, the time has come to show your abilities. Snape sternly followed Eisen's words and changed the subject, starting to tease Lockhart. Lockhart said that? After hearing Snape's words, Eisen frowned slightly. Yes, of course I can take care of the basilisk inside. Lockhart walked past Eisen and came straight to Snape. Then, let's go down together. Then Gilderoy, We'll leave you to deal with it, said Professor McGonagall, looking very serious on his face. This is your perfect opportunity to show your talents. We promise to let no one get in your way. You can be alone, let someone deal with that basilisk. Now I finally let you go. Ahem. Hearing Professor McGonagall's words, Lockhart coughed violently. Don't you all go down? I mean, of course I can deal with the basilisk, but I need to teach Harry and them how I will deal with the basilisk, so they must come with me. Get down. After a while, Lockhart seemed to find an excuse and pointed to Harry while asking Professor McGonagall. Chapter 56 in Death. After hearing Lockhart's brazen excuse, Professor McGonagall and Professor Snape were stunned for a moment. Before they could say anything, the faces of Harry, Ron, and Hermione on the side turned pale in an instant. Even with their enchanted sunglasses and prankster chime recorders in their hands, confronting a horrific monster like the basilisk was a little frightening for them. Professor Eisen, what do you think of Professor Lockhart's suggestion? Snape said softly to break the atmosphere of the scene, and then glanced at Lockhart, seeming to mean something. Well, what Professor Lockhart said is quite reasonable. Eisen said after a moment of pondering. I knew that someone would agree with me. Now, let's go down. Hearing Eisen's supportive words, Lockhart suddenly gained confidence, shook his body in front of everyone, and pointed at the water pipe on the side. Of course, Professor Lockhart is the professor of defense against the dark arts. I think not only Harry and the others want to know about his method of dealing with the basilisk, but the professors also don't want to miss it. Eisen said calmly, his eyes swept over Snape and McGonagall. Then what are you waiting for? Get rid of the basilisk as soon as possible. Hagrid will be released sooner, and the old wizard Dumbledore will return to Hogwarts. I think they will thank me. Lockhart showed his signature smile. As he spoke, he took out his wand. Seeing that Lockhart was standing on the edge of the water pipe, Eisen saw Snape staring at Lockhart. Just before Lockhart was about to swing his wand and cast a spell that he didn't know if he could succeed, Snape's mouth moved. I don't know if he was chanting a spell, but with Snape's movement, Lockhart's legs gave way and he fell straight down. What? The muffled screams echoed back and forth in the pipes, giving people an eerie feeling. Tsk, this method is really too dirty. Seeing this scene, Eisen couldn't help being speechless. Let's go. Take a look at this special teaching and see how Professor Lockhart solves the basilisk. Eisen said to the two professors, took out his wand and nodded to the three of Hermione. After Eisen's action, the trio felt a warm current flow from the cards on their bodies instantly. After flowing through the whole body, the body quickly became light and light, as if it would fly with a little force. By the way, you should wear your sunglasses well. The eyes of the basilisk are the most threatening place. Eisen took out a card and turned it into sunglasses, tapped it with his wand, and then put it on himself. The three of them nodded while wearing sunglasses, and a social style rushed towards them. Watching this scene, the corners of Eisen's mouth twitched involuntarily. However, Eisen's eyes lit up when he saw Professor McGonagall and Professor Snape. After bewitching two sunglasses that changed with playing cards, he handed them over. Professor McGonagall, Professor Snape, this may be useful. Thank you, Professor Eisen. After taking the sunglasses, Professor McGonagall thanked Eisen. Then, she took off her glasses and tapped them with a magic wand, and then the lenses of her glasses turned black, and the sunglasses Eisen sent over changed into a playing card again. Well, you are awesome. The corner of Eisen's mouth twitched, pretending he didn't see this scene. In fact, the magic that Eisen applied to the card-changing sunglasses is not a profound magic, so it is normal that Professor McGonagall can easily break it. The book-chasing app recommended to me by an old book friend who has known me for 10 years, yet we're reading. It's really easy to use. I rely on reading and listening to books to pass the time while driving and before going to bed. You can download Yegwoyudu here. On the other hand, after Professor Snape took over the sunglasses, he put them on his eyes without ink stains. Good guy. After seeing this scene, Eisen couldn't help thinking of Lu Huaqiang's demeanor wearing black sunglasses. Immediately afterwards, everyone entered the dark pipeline one after another. Due to the application of the floating spell, the speed of several people rushing down was not fast. But as time went on, Eisen felt that the length of the pipeline exceeded his expectations. This dark, sticky, endless slide. Under the fluorescent light, Eisen could see that there were many tubes branching out in all directions, but none were as thick as this one. The pipe they dropped was twists and turns, and the slope was very steep all the way down. Perhaps they had slipped deep, deep under the school, even deeper than those underground classrooms. In front, Professor McGonagall and Professor Snape slid down quickly, and the trio behind them made a slight collision sound at the corner. Finally, the downward slide turned into a horizontal direction, and Eisen and others came to a circular clearing filled with stagnant water. After everyone emerged from the pipe, they landed on the wet ground next to the stagnant water. However, since Eisen has already seen through all this through the perspective of God, he already knows the surrounding environment after landing. In front of him was a dark tunnel, surrounded by stones, big enough to allow people to stand in it. Not far away, Lockhart was standing up from the ground. His body was covered in mud. His face was as pale as a ghost, and he looked very embarrassed. Phew. I'm sure we're miles below Hogwarts Castle. Lockhart said, a conclusion that everyone could see after seeing the crowd. That's right. Maybe it's under the Black Lake. A bright light emerged from the tip of the wand, and after swimming around the surrounding walls, Eisen nodded. Judging from the dampness of the surrounding walls, they have a high probability of being located at the bottom of the lake. Are you? Lockhart looked into the glasses of the crowd with a surprised expression. When you encounter a basilisk, if you don't have time to close your eyes, you can rely on it. Eisen smiled slightly and handed over a pair of sunglasses turned into cards. Now that Lockhart has noticed, Eisen doesn't mind giving him one. After all, if Lockhart fights the basilisk head-on, the probability of being stared to death is quite high. But obviously, it is not very appropriate for Lockhart, a parallel import professor, to die in a secret room. I think I'll have no problem dealing with the basilisk next. Lockhart took the sunglasses and put them on. In the dark tunnel, it was as silent as a tomb. Although the voices of several people were not loud, they were clearly highlighted. Walking along the dark tunnel, whenever Eisen lands, the wet soil under his feet will automatically turn into hard marble, and when Eisen walks through, the changed marble will return to its original form. Slytherin must have spent a lot of time building the Chamber of Secrets. Eisen discovered that this project was really not to be underestimated after going deep into the tunnel of the Chamber of Secrets. Without the help of magic, it should not be possible to build it on such a scale. With Salazar Slytherin's level of magic, it might take only a day to build the Chamber of Secrets. Snape retorted, his tone very calm. Well, maybe not even a day. Eisen nodded secretly, agreeing with Snape's point of view. Turning a dark bend, Eisen noticed a large black figure lying motionless at the other end of the tunnel. Be careful, Eisen said. An array of light flew from the tip of the wand, shooting at the shadow like lightning. Boom! The huge monster was broken into several pieces, but not only did it not make the expected roar, but also there was no blood spatter. Eisen and Snape stepped forward, only to realize that what was broken into several pieces was just a huge snakeskin. The snakeskin is green and very bright. It looks like the snake skin of a poisonous snake. Judging from the size of the snake's skin, the basilisk that shed this layer of skin must be at least 20 feet long. It's the shed skin of the basilisk. Snape tapped the snake's skin with his wand and said to Professor McGonagall, "Call." The trio standing still breathed a sigh of relief. It looks like it's been a while. Maybe it's the skin left by the basilisk the last time the Chamber of Secrets was opened. After tapping on a broken piece of snake slough, Eisen guessed. Chapter 57, Lockhart vs. Basilisk, Part 1. Everyone didn't stay long in front of the snake slough and continued to walk through it, turning one tunnel turn after another, stepping on wet standing water. Hermione's shoes were soaked by the time Eisen and the others encountered a solid wall. In contrast, Eisen and others were not affected by stagnant water at all. Of course, Professor Lockhart's shoes were as wet as the trio's, which did not surprise Eisen. Hermione came to Eisen's side and tugged on his sleeve. Looks like a sign for the Slytherin chamber, Eisen said, looking at Snape. Obviously, that's it. Although Lockhart looked embarrassed, he was in good spirits. He went directly to the wall and patted the round door inlaid on it. This gate was unlike any other in the castle, for it was carved with two intertwined snakes and large, shining emeralds set in their eyes. That needs to be opened, Snape said coldly, stepping forward to stroke the twisted snake on the door. Then you need, Eisen said. Suddenly a flash of inspiration flashed in his mind, and his face became serious. You need a password or forcible destruction. Saying this, Eisen did not step forward, but quickly shifted his gaze to the rear. Because Eisen suddenly realized that the basilisk should be unlikely to be inside. You know, when the Chamber of Secrets was opened for the first time, the basilisk's range of activities had always been in the pipes of Hogwarts Castle. But the fourth attack never happened because of Eisen's interference. Even the Horcrux, the journal, had been given to Dumbledore. Whether this Horcrux was destroyed by Dumbledore, Eisen didn't know, but it was predictable that Voldemort would never have a chance to open the door in front of him. This also means that the basilisk has no chance to drill back at all, but has been wandering in the castle's pipeline. As his thoughts turned, Eisen had already brought to mind all the intertwined tunnels and pipes beneath Hogwarts Castle. Immediately afterwards, a snake more than 20 feet long appeared in Eisen's sight. Judging from the location where the basilisk was crawling, the tunnel that Eisen and the others walked just now diverged a lot, so everyone walked along the way and did not see the basilisk. However, perhaps it was the movement of the people walking in the tunnel that attracted the attention of the basilisk, and Eisen found that the basilisk was crawling in the direction of where the people were. Boom! As soon as the explosion sounded, while keeping an eye on the basilisk, Eisen noticed that Snape swung his wand and cast an invisible spell that hit the door, causing the explosion. When everything returned to calm, The gate carved with 2 snakes appeared to be intact. Obviously, Snape's spell hadn't worked. Lockhart was overjoyed when he saw this, stepped forward and stroked the twisted snake on the gate, and then said complacently, "Of course I can break through it, but this tunnel can't withstand the destructive power of the spell, and you can't do it either. I don't want to be buried here." The book-chasing app recommended to me by an old book friend who has known me for 10 years, yet we're reading. It's really easy to use. I rely on reading and listening to books to pass the time while driving and before going to bed. You can download Yegwoyudu here. WB at plus at. Eisen noticed that almost as soon as Lockhart's voice fell, everyone present showed extremely disdainful expressions on their faces. Even Hermione, who was standing next to Eisen, couldn't help rolling her eyes. However, Eisen didn't step forward to try to force open the door. Instead, he was thinking whether to wait for the basilisk to chase him outside, and then deal with it directly in the tunnel, or to enter the secret room and introduce the basilisk into the secret room to deal with it. After pondering for a moment, Eisen felt that it would be more appropriate to introduce the basilisk into the secret room. After all, the secret room must be enchanted, and its firmness must be much stronger than the tunnel. Moreover, although the tunnel can accommodate everyone to shuttle through, the space is inevitably a little smaller, and they cannot let go of their hands and feet during battle. Harry, after thinking about it, Eisen gestured to Harry. Yes, Professor." Harry seemed to understand something, glanced at the expressionless Professor McGonagall, and then walked to the door step by step, looking at the 2 snakes wrapped around the gate. Although Harry felt that the professor was by his side, he couldn't help swallowing. Looking into those emerald eyes, Harry felt like they were alive. Open. The low, hoarse hiss sounded, giving people a creepy feeling. But as Harry's voice fell, the 2 snakes on the door twisted and quickly separated. Immediately afterwards, the door was opened. "Professor Lockhart? What are you doing running behind?" Professor McGonagall glanced at Lockhart, who had run behind, showing suspicion. I think there may be some danger in the back. I have to take care of Ron and the others." Lockhart gripped his wand tightly, pushed Ron in front of him, and put on a brave face. With a sneer on his face, Snape headed inside first. Afterwards, everyone crossed the round gate and went deep inside. As for Lockhart, he got his wish and landed in the last place. After entering, what caught everyone's eyes was a long, dimly lit space. On both sides of the aisle in the space stood stone pillars engraved with coiled snakes, and the towering stone pillars propped up the ceiling that melted into the darkness. Everyone walked forward in the aisle, and in the silent room, the sound of footsteps was particularly conspicuous. At the end of the passage was a wide open space, and at the end of the open space was a statue as tall as the room, which was pressed against the dark wall behind. Eisen has a god's perspective, so he can clearly see the whole picture of this statue. It is an old, monkey-like face, with a long sparse beard that almost reaches the hem of the wizard's robe carved in stone. 2 big gray feet stood on the smooth floor of the room. Apparently, this is the builder of the Chamber of Secrets and one of the founders of Hogwarts, Salazar Slytherin. In addition to here, Eisen has also seen his image on some books in the library. Around the clearing, though, as Eisen saw it, there was no sign of the basilisk. "The basilisk is not here." Snape's cold voice sounded, and then he looked at Harry with intriguing eyes. I knew it. The basilisk must have known that I was going to deal with it, so it had already escaped." Lockhart, who was standing behind, began to boast again. "Professor Eisen," suddenly, Hermione seemed to remember something, looked at Eisen with a startled expression, and then looked behind her. Immediately afterwards, Harry also looked behind him in the same horror, and hurriedly retreated to Eisen's side. Obviously, they who knew part of the truth also guessed the possibility that the basilisk was still wandering outside. What's the problem?" Lockhart watched Harry's movements, turned around with some doubts, and found that there was nothing unusual. Rusting sounds came from outside, and Professor McGonagall and Professor Snape turned their heads to look in the direction of the round door. After a moment, Eisen noticed that the basilisk had wandered to the gate. Its heavy body slid through the wet earth and entered through the round gate. "Gilderoy, I leave the basilisk to you. Everyone be careful." Professor McGonagall waved his hand, and several rays of light enveloped everyone, adding a layer of protective armor to everyone. "Yeah, just a basilisk. Of course I can deal with it." Lockhart stammered, wand in hand, a particularly ugly grin on his contorted face. After sneaking into the secret room from the outside, the basilisk immediately noticed everyone. The already extremely hungry basilisk rushed towards Lockhart without any extra movement. Fortunately, everyone is wearing enchanted sunglasses, basically ignoring the basilisk's deadly stare ability to a large extent. "Bones to pieces," Lockhart pointed at the rushing basilisk with trembling fingers, casting the highest level of attack spells in his life. As the sound fell, a red light flashed from the wand in Lockhart's hand, hitting the basilisk. But unfortunately, the basilisk was not affected in the slightest. Its huge body was entangled between the stone pillars, and then it raised its head high and rushed straight towards Lockhart. Boom! A roar sounded, and the buff added to Lockhart by Professor McGonagall was completely broken. Lockhart was hit hard, and was knocked several meters away, falling to the feet of the Slytherin statue. Ouch! Lockhart vomited a pool of blood and wriggled without getting up. It appears that the body has been severely injured, but the basilisk would not wait for him to stand up and swept over with its long tail. "Professor!" Hermione screamed, grabbing Eisen's arm tightly. Harry and Ron next to him turned their heads away, as if they couldn't bear to see the tragedy that happened next. Chapter 58, Lockhart vs. Basilisk, Part 2. Professor McGonagall looked solemnly at the fallen Lockhart, and Snape also held out his wand. Even though they didn't want to see Lockhart, they couldn't watch him being killed by the basilisk. I saw Professor McGonagall pointing his wand, and a vine entangled Lockhart and pulled him aside, avoiding the basilisk's tail attack. At the same time, Snape slashed the basilisk's body with an invisible god's shadowless curse. Black blood spilled from the wound on the basilisk. As if feeling the pain of the body, the twisted body of the basilisk bumped around, and the stone pillar near the open space was hit by the basilisk to break some cracks. Afterwards, the basilisk seemed to be enraged. Its distorted body surged wildly and rushed towards the crowd. Feeling the tightness of Hermione's grip on his arm, Eisen narrowed his eyes, and after glancing at Snape and McGonagall next to him, he raised his wand and pointed it at Lockhart, who was lying beside him. Following Eisen's movements, a foot-square stone platform suddenly rose from the floor under Lockhart. After the stone platform lifted Lockhart up, the top end turned into a chair, which straightened Lockhart's body. Makes it look like he's sitting on it. Immediately afterwards, armrests appeared on both sides of the chair, and the armrest on the right changed into a bracket to prop up Lockhart's right hand and hold his wand in it. With a thought, Eisen moved the support on Lockhart's right hand so that the wand in his right hand pointed at the basilisk rushing towards him. Then, a little green light appeared from the tip of Lockhart's wand. The book-chasing app recommended to me by an old book friend who has known me for 10 years, Yegwa Reading. It's really easy to use. I rely on reading and listening to books to pass the time while driving and before going to bed. You can download Yegwa here. Wind blades appeared out of thin air in front of Lockhart, forming a wind blade tornado to attack the basilisk. A series of scars continued to appear on the basilisk, knocking the basilisk to the ground. Speaking of it, this is a very complicated process, but it is actually an action that is completed within a second. In the eyes of Harry and others, this was a very strange scene. Lockhart, who was pulled aside by Professor McGonagall, suddenly sat on a chair on a raised stone platform, held his wand tightly and pointed at the basilisk, and saw a series of the wind blade was like a tornado, cutting the basilisk into cuts and bruises. Of course, this is not surprising. What is strange is that Lockhart's sunglasses fell to the ground. His eyes were tightly closed to avoid staring at the basilisk, but his head drooped to the side, as if in a coma. Since he was unconscious, how did he cast his magic? And it's such a powerful magic. I saw the bruised basilisk constantly twisting and rolling on the ground, but it was already seriously injured and dying within a short time. Professor Lockhart is that good? Ron was stunned by this scene. He has always been Lockhart's #1 black fan, and firmly believes that Lockhart is a big liar. You know, Ron can see how Lockhart behaves in class. But unexpectedly, Lockhart became so powerful that he could kill the basilisk by himself. This, Hermione looked at Lockhart's miserable appearance with his head drooping, and at the movement of Eisen's wand pointing at Lockhart, a little confused about what was going on. Professor McGonagall and Snape stopped what they were doing and turned their attention to Eisen. Some were amazed and some were puzzled. Professor Lockhart's strength looks very powerful. He really deserves to be the professor of defense against the dark arts class. Eisen pointed his wand at Lockhart and praised Lockhart calmly. With a thought in mind, the wind blade tornado expanded rapidly, turning into a 10-foot thick wind column, then compressed and merged into a wind blade, directly beheading the basilisk's head. The body of the basilisk twitched heavily. After twisting and rolling a few times, it was completely silent. The huge wind blade also dissipated under Eisen's thoughts. At the same time, the support on Lockhart's right hand moved slowly, allowing his wand-holding right hand to slump on the armrest. It feels like the spell has been cast. The basilisk is dead, came Hermione's voice. That's right, the basilisk is dead. Sensing Hermione's gaze, Eisen came to the huge head of the basilisk, and after feeling no curse feedback from the bulb-like eyeballs of the basilisk, Eisen gave a definite conclusion. Afterwards, Eisen took off his sunglasses, dispelled the magic, and turned back into poker and put it away. Seeing Eisen's actions, others also put away their sunglasses. Since the basilisk has been killed, Hagrid will be fine, and Headmaster Dumbledore will be back. Harry put on his glasses with a relaxed smile on his face. That's right, it's time for Headmaster Dumbledore and Hagrid to come back. Professor McGonagall gave a rare smile. Yes, the basilisk that caused the attack has been dealt with. Since Hagrid did not do all this, Hagrid will be fine. As for Headmaster Dumbledore, I think he should be back soon. Eisen nodded, nodding in agreement. By the way, Professor Lockhart. Ron wandered around beside the basilisk corpse, rubbed his hands on the palm-sized scale, and ran to Lockhart as if he suddenly remembered something. With a thought in Eisen's mind, the chair under Lockhart changed back to its original shape, and the stone platform quickly fell down and became the floor again. Lockhart was lying on the ground. His face was covered with blood, and his clothes were already filthy, looking extremely miserable. But judging from the fact that he was still breathing, he didn't die. He was injured a little and passed out. After checking, Professor McGonagall concluded. At the same time, Eisen noticed that Professor McGonagall was also relieved. It seemed that she didn't want Lockhart to die so tragically in the Chamber of Secrets. A small moan escaped Lockhart's mouth, and he opened his eyes. What's going on here? Looking at Professor McGonagall and Ron who surrounded him, Lockhart asked his own question in confusion. Congratulations, Professor Lockhart. You took down the basilisk by yourself and showed your glorious moment. It's really amazing. Eisen gave Lockhart a thumbs up, and then pointed to the decapitated corpse of the basilisk. Really? I said it's okay to deal with the basilisk. See, there's nothing I can't solve. Lockhart's blood-stained face broke into a smile that looked extraordinarily comical. When he wanted to stand up, he fell to the ground and covered his chest with his hands. At the same time, the smile on his face twisted directly. Beside, Hermione and Harry, who had already guessed what was going on, looked at Eisen in bewilderment. But when they thought of being told by Eisen to hide their strength, the two of them faintly showed a look of surprise. That's right, Professor Lockhart, you are amazing. I think you can write a book after this experience called How I Solved the Basilisk. Hermione, at this moment, directly turned into Lockhart's fangirl, complimented Say It right away. Professor Lockhart, when did you teach us the magic spell to defeat the basilisk? That's really amazing. Harry, the savior's compliment, directly made Lockhart happy. Suppressing the pain in his chest, he waved at Harry. Laugh. Snape sneered and turned his head away, as if he couldn't see the compliments being paid to Lockhart. Then he walked up to the decapitated head of the basilisk and observed it. Let's go. I think, Gilderoy, you need to stay in the school hospital for a while. Professor McGonagall saw the blood oozing from the corner of Lockhart's mouth and interrupted several people with a frown. I think the body of the basilisk needs to be taken out. Eisen paused slightly and continued. Only in this way can the others, Cornelius Fudge, believe that the monster in the Chamber of Secrets has been solved. That's right. The body of the basilisk will be taken out and shown to the little wizards, so that they will know that I, Gilderoy Lockhart, took care of the basilisk. That way, they will know that the attack will never happen again. Lockhart said although he was very embarrassed, his eyes were shining brightly. Seeing Lockhart's appearance, everyone was speechless. However, everyone left the secret room immediately afterward. Professor McGonagall walked ahead, followed by Eisen and Hermione. The wounded Lockhart was supported by Harry and Ron, walking behind Eisen and Hermione. At the end was Snape, who had the basilisk's corpse enchanted on his body. A soft light shone at the tip of Professor McGonagall's wand, bringing a glimmer of light to the dark and deep tunnel. Although the entire tunnel was still damp and gloomy, it was different from when they came, and the atmosphere around everyone was obviously a little more relaxed when they left. After all, when they came in, everyone was going to deal with the basilisk, so the atmosphere would inevitably be a little more depressing. But now that the basilisk had been killed, there was no need to worry. Like Lockhart, who was supported by Harry and Ron, and even sang a little song to himself. Chapter 59, Displaying the Basilisk Corpse. When Eisen and the others stood again on the wet floor of Moaning Myrtle's bathroom, the sink that covered the plumbing channel slid itself back into place. Looking at the mud and slime on Lockhart's body, mixed with mottled blood, Professor McGonagall directly cast a cleansing spell on him, then ordered Harry and Ron to take him to the school hospital. As for Snape, it was arranged to display the basilisk corpse in the foyer, in order to spread the word that the monster in the Chamber of Secrets had been killed. After making simple arrangements, Professor McGonagall left. Eisen guessed she was going to call Dumbledore. As for Eisen himself, he quietly came to the library with the attitude of hiding merit and fame. However, to Eisen's surprise, Hermione actually followed him all the way to the library. Is there any problem? Looking at Hermione, who was sitting next to him and looked at himself with a smirk, Eisen used the cards to transform into a mirror and didn't find anything wrong with him. Professor, Hermione suppressed her smile, leaned close to Eisen and whispered, "You killed the basilisk, didn't you?" "How is it possible?" Eisen shook his head. As you can see, Lockhart cast a powerful spell to defeat the basilisk. But Professor Lockhart had passed out by then. Hermione wasn't that kind. Eisen had a hesitant look on his face, then waved to Hermione. Hermione's eyes lit up, and she put her ear next to Eisen. The faint fragrance penetrated into Eisen's nose, But he didn't have any other thoughts at the moment. He just said solemnly, "There is a special talent in the wizarding world called killing in dreams. And there was a man named Chow Chow in history. Wizards have this kind of talent, and I think Professor Lockhart has this kind of talent, so he can cast powerful spells while unconscious." Is that really the case? Hermione looked suspicious, obviously not believing Eisen's words. "I'm not sure. I only know that Chow Chow seems to be a wizard in Asia. He was very famous in history and almost unified a country." Eisen shook his head solemnly. "Okay, I see." Hermione looked at Eisen with a, "I believe you. By the way, let Harry and Ron know when you go back. Take a good rest tonight, and the dueling team's actual combat training class will be suspended for one day." Eisen smiled slightly, and then, as if remembering something, he gave instructions directly. "Okay, that's right, Professor. You don't need this thing." Hermione nodded, then raised her head, and while looking at Eisen, a tape recorder appeared in her hand. "In the Chamber of Secrets, when Lockhart was dealing with the basilisk, why didn't you take this out?" Eisen said with a weak tone. "Forgot." Hermione showed a little embarrassment on her little face. Okay. It's really useless. You can dismantle the research by yourself. I think it will be helpful for learning alchemy." Looking at the snoring recorder in Hermione's hand, listen to her answer. Eisen felt that Harry and the others should have forgotten it too. In fact, this thing was originally intended to deal with the basilisk, but since Lockhart is showing his skills to face the basilisk, and there are several professors standing in front of it, it is understandable that the trio forgot to take out the snoring recorder. That night, on the opposite side of the foyer leading to the entrance of the auditorium, the corpse of a basilisk more than 20 feet away lay quietly there. Every little wizard who passed through the hall could see this huge and terrifying monster. Although the basilisk has been killed, the young wizards still think it is very scary. "It's terrible. How could Hogwarts have such a big snake? I'm sure it must be the scary monster in the Slytherin chamber." So, the legend of the Chamber of Secrets is true? Didn't you notice? The monster in the secret room was killed, which means that the attack will not happen again. The little wizards coming and going were whispering, and things quickly spread throughout Hogwarts. Eisen, Professor McGonagall, Snape, and Professor Flitwick were standing next to the corpse of the basilisk. Professor Flitwick saw the basilisk for the first time. Although it had been decapitated, it still made him gasp in amazement. Judging from its size, it has lived for at least 1,000 years. Professor Flitwick said. Eisen stopped in front of the basilisk's head, which was stained with black blood and looked extremely hideous. However, Eisen didn't pay attention to other things, but touched the two light bulb-sized eyeballs with his fingers. Truth be told, Eisen was intrigued by the basilisk's innate ability to stare deadly. Of course, this is also the most frightening thing about a monster like the basilisk, apart from its highly poisonous teeth. Of course, there are plenty of ways for Eisen to avoid eye contact with the basilisk. Whether he puts on the enchanted sunglasses himself, or directly transforms the basilisk into a large sunglasses with the transfiguration technique, he is confident that he can deal with the basilisk without injury. However, what made Eisen curious was, if he stared directly at the basilisk, then with the huge magic power in his body, could he be directly immune to the basilisk stare? Will he be stared to death by the basilisk, petrified, or simply immune? After all, Eisen was confident that he could swallow a few spells like disarming and stunning spells. While analyzing his own strength, Eisen directly swiped his fingers on the eye sockets of the basilisk and removed the two eyeballs. Obviously, as the material of the basilisk, Eisen is most interested in these two eyeballs. Judging from the current situation, after the basilisk died, its eyeballs lost the ability to stare to death. But Eisen still wants to collect it and study it later to see if he can get any results. The one who moved the same way as Eisen was Professor Snape at the side. However, perhaps because he is a professor of potions, the blood, scales, and snake venom of the basilisk are all available to him. "Phileas, we should make a good publicity. Let the outside world see that we have solved the trouble in the Chamber of Secrets, so that Hagrid can be proved innocent and Principal Dumbledore will come back." Professor McGonagall naturally knew why Hagrid was taken away, also know the reason why Dumbledore was dismissed. "You're right, Minerva. Once word of the basilisk solution spread, Connolly would have no reason to imprison Hagrid. Headmaster Dumbledore's troubles would be gone." Professor Flitwick seemed to agree with this approach. After the materials were collected, Eisen showed a satisfied smile on his face. Unlike the materials Snape needed, Eisen not only got the eyeballs of the basilisk, but also cut off two of the basilisk's fangs. Judging from the current situation, the poisonous fangs of the basilisk are extremely powerful and can directly destroy the Horcrux. If a person is stung by a basilisk's fangs, only the tears of Dumbledore's pet fox can heal. Therefore, collecting the basilisk fangs, Eisen thought that one day he could research more powerful healing items, or extract the toxins from them to refine powerful toxic items. Because they wanted to publicize the killing of the basilisk, the professors did not intend to hide the body of the basilisk, but displayed it directly in the hall. Of course, in order to prevent the little wizard from coming into contact with the corpse of the basilisk and encounter accidents, the professors also applied some protective magic to isolate it. When Eisen returned to the office, he found that it was already 9 o'clock in the evening. After the third attack, Hogwarts had already imposed a curfew. Especially after Hagrid and Dumbledore left the school, the little wizards had to strictly follow the rules of Hogwarts. Therefore, the castle at Hogwarts was very quiet at this time. But now that the terrifying monster basilisk in the Chamber of Secrets has been dealt with, and its corpse is still displayed in the foyer, it will take a few days for Hogwarts to resume its lively scene. Sitting behind the desk, Eisen leaned back in the chair, but was still thinking about the Chamber of Secrets. Slytherin built the Chamber of Secrets in Hogwarts Castle, and leaving the basilisk behind should not be as simple as weeding out students who are not qualified to learn magic. Recommended, Yegwa reading and chasing books is really easy to use. Download Yegwa here, everyone can try it soon. He had previously thought that although Slytherin had different ideas from the other 3 founders, he should not be able to kill Muggle-born students. So, perhaps the purpose of Slytherin building the Chamber of Secrets and leaving the basilisk behind is to protect some of the treasures he left behind? A few guesses raced through Eisen's mind. Chapter 60. Cornelius Fudge and Rita Skeeter. After making such a guess, when Eisen's observation feature was turned on, God's perspective looked directly at the location of the secret room. He glanced across the tunnel and scanned back and forth in the secret room, but found nothing useful. The empty secret room was still the same as it was before he entered, without any changes. On both sides of the aisle are coiled stone pillars of serpents, some of which were hit by the basilisk to reveal some cracks. The statue of Slaterling against the wall still stood there quietly. Eisen knew that the statue could be opened with a snake-like password like, "Speak to me, Slytherin," the greatest of the Hogwarts 4. But he obviously doesn't need it. With a thought, Eisen looked deep into the statue and came to an empty place. However, what left Eisen speechless was that there was nothing inside. After a while, Eisen still didn't find the slightest clue after searching all over the place. It seems that Voldemort should have looted all of Slytherin's secret chambers. Eisen murmured, giving up and continuing to search for the so-called treasure of the secret chamber. The next day, the whole of Hogwarts became lively. As Eisen expected, the little wizards discussed the topic of the basilisk, which was even more noisy than the day before. During meals and class breaks, the little wizards would always pass by the hall, pointing at the huge basilisk corpse, and then discussing how the savior Harry and his friends killed the basilisk. What a lot of effort. Soon, Harry found that the little wizards who had been avoiding him before rushed forward to greet him. People's admiration for the savior became louder and louder. It all stemmed from everything Professor Lockhart bragged about in class. That's right, after spending the night in the school hospital, Lockhart wasn't feeling well at first, but in order to show off his brilliant experience in front of the little wizards, he dragged his injured body to attend classes with the little wizards. In class, everyone noticed that Lockhart was different from before. In the past, Lockhart would only recite passages from the book in large chunks and let the little wizard play the role. But the little wizards found that Lockhart became more confident, especially when talking about how he killed the basilisk after a heroic and tenacious fight in the secret room. He was very energetic. This surprised the little wizards who didn't know, and some girls even showed fascinated eyes on Lockhart. To make his experience sound more real, Lockhart didn't forget the trio. Before Lockhart told about his experience of fighting the basilisk, he introduced in detail how Harry Potter found and opened the entrance to the secret room with basilisk under his leadership. Therefore, when people knew that Lockhart had single-handedly killed the basilisk and solved the trouble in the Chamber of Secrets, they gave Harry a thumbs up while worshipping Lockhart. Such a legendary experience made people forget the fact that Harry had always been the object of suspicion. "Hey Potter, great job." "Good job, Potter. Congratulations on helping Professor Lockhart find the entrance to the Chamber of Secrets." "Ha, Potter, you're in luck." Little wizards kept passing in front of Harry and praised him. Of course, there were also Slytherin students who unabashedly satirized Harry. "Oh, Potter, you silly baby. It's amazing to find the entrance to the Chamber of Secrets. You must feel great." It was Peeve's voice. When Eisen saw Harry in the auditorium, he was surrounded by many Gryffindor students. Neville and Seamus looked at Harry excitedly, and Fred and George kept exclaiming, "Great Harry Potter, let's cheer together." But obviously, Harry couldn't accept such an atmosphere, so he buried his face in the plate, wishing to be drowned in food. "Professor Eisen, is it true that Harry opened the entrance to the Chamber of Secrets?" Seeing Eisen coming to the dining table, Seamus asked with great interest. This sentence immediately caught everyone's attention. Fred and George, Neville and Dean all looked at Eisen. Even Harry, who buried his face, looked up. That's right, it was Harry who found and opened the Chamber of Secrets with Snakespeak. If it wasn't for Harry, the professors wouldn't have been able to deal with the basilisk. Eisen winked at Harry, then said with a smile, "By the way, Professor, we have seen the basilisk corpse displayed in the foyer. Can you tell me how Professor Lockhart got rid of the basilisk?" Friedella crossed the stool and sat beside Eisen. Everyone immediately became interested and looked at Eisen curiously. The situation at the time was like this. When Professor Lockhart, Professor McGonagall, and Snape were going to enter the secret room together, Professor Lockhart said that he would solve the basilisk alone to show his glorious moment. Eisen rolled his eyes. Talk about the situation at that time. When the basilisk rushed towards Professor Lockhart was not afraid of danger. He first cast an iron armor spell on himself, and then with a sliding shovel, he came to the side of the basilisk. Although he escaped the attack, he was also slightly injured. Immediately afterwards, Professor Lockhart cast a powerful cutting spell that directly decapitated the basilisk. That's it. Lockhart solved the trouble in the Chamber of Secrets and killed the basilisk. When Eisen finished all this, everyone looked at him in bewilderment, especially Harry and Hermione, who had even more weird expressions on their bewildered faces. Recommended, Yegwa reading and chasing books is really easy to use. Download Yegwa Do here. Everyone can try it soon. This seems a little different from what Professor Lockhart said in class. George put forward his own opinion. The little wizards next to him nodded in agreement. Of course there are some differences. After all, Professor Lockhart narrates it from the perspective of fighting the basilisk head-on. I'm speaking from the perspective of a spectator. Eisen's face was very calm, and he didn't seem to be fooling others at all. Trace. So that's it. The little wizards suddenly showed a look of enlightenment. By the way, where's Ron? Why didn't you see him here? Eisen looked at Harry, and in the change of sight, Ron was already spotted in Hagrid's hut. He's going to feed Hagrid's pets so Fong doesn't starve to death. Harry swallowed a piece of bread and told where Ron had gone. Eisen had a thought, and from God's perspective, he could see Ron sitting on a chair holding the Era cub in his arms and teasing him constantly, with a smirk on his face. It seems the husky pup he gave to Hagrid was a hit. After eating, the little wizards all went to class. Eisen saw several figures in the field outside the hall. Entering the foyer and looking out, you can see Professor McGonagall wearing a green velvet wizard robe and a wizard hat of the same color from a distance, walking towards Eisen. There were 3 people behind her. One was short and stocky, with messy gray hair and wrinkled skin on his face that made him look a little old. He was wearing a strange mishmash of clothes: pinstriped suit, bright red tie, long black cape, purple pointed boots. He carried a dark green top hat under his arm. With a smile on his face, he was talking to Professor McGonagall. The other person was a woman with blonde hair who was exquisitely dressed, wearing a pair of bejeweled glasses, holding an alligator leather handbag, and wearing a green robe. Behind the woman was a fat man, holding an old-fashioned camera in his hand, looking particularly sloppy. Professor Eisen, this is the Minister of Magic, Cornelius Fudge. This is Rita Skeeter, reporter from the Daily Prophet and photographer Bozo. They came to see the body of the basilisk. After coming to the foyer, Professor McGonagall introduced the identities of several people to Eisen. Welcome to Hogwarts. I am Eisen Turner, Professor of Astronomy. Eisen nodded to the 3 with a smile, and then moved away. Hello, Professor Eisen. Fudge also greeted Eisen with a smile. When meeting for the first time, Fudge's performance completely makes it impossible to see that he is actually an idiot. Wow, Professor Eisen, you became a professor at Hogwarts at such a young age. Do you have any secrets? Rita took out a notebook from the crocodile leather handbag and took out a green quill. The quill kept beating, and it was already ready to move. Chapter 61. Lockhart interviewed. For Rita Skeeter, although Eisen met her for the first time, he knew her tricks very well. Her quill is a thinking shorthand quill, not only good at tampering with people's language, but also good at adding oil and vinegar. If Eisen said a very simple and normal sentence, it would basically become an unrealistic sentence when it was written down by Rita Skeeter's feather notes. Therefore, although Eisen was still smiling when faced with the hostile question, he did not intend to answer at all. Instead, he turned around and stretched out his hand to signal. This is the corpse of the basilisk. Please take a look. The trouble in the secret room has been resolved by the school. Oh, I saw it. Fudge stepped forward and walked around the corpse of the basilisk, exclaiming in amazement. Is it that terrifying monster in the legend of the Chamber of Secrets? That's right, Connolly. The attack on the school was done by the basilisk. It has nothing to do with Hagrid. Professor McGonagall looked at Fudge seriously. Okay, that's right. I've also been under a lot of pressure. Now that Hagrid can be proven to have nothing to do with the attack, he will be back soon. Fudge nodded, seeming to have understood McGonagall the meaning of the professor. And Dumbledore, Professor McGonagall paused. Yes, of course Dumbledore is still the headmaster of Hogwarts, and I believe the school board will definitely make the right decision. Fudge's tone was a little brisk. Humph. It seemed that she didn't wait for Eisen's answer, which made Rita very dissatisfied. After snorting coldly, she focused on the huge corpse of the basilisk. Rita gestured to the man behind her, and then Eisen saw Bazuo taking a photo of the basilisk's corpse. It seems that Hogwarts was able to deal with the basilisk in the Chamber of Secrets, which is worth reporting. Professor Eisen, May I ask who killed the basilisk? Rita walked around the corpse of the basilisk and asked Eisen. Miss Skeeter, I think you must know him. Eisen's eyes lit up, and he immediately paid attention. He is the defense against the dark arts professor at Hogwarts, Gilderoy Lockhart. I think you must want to learn from him. Know something there. Eisen suddenly thought, since Rita likes to spread rumors and make things up, and Lockhart happens to be able to fabricate some experiences on himself, wouldn't it be a match made in heaven for the two to cooperate? So, when the other party asked who killed the basilisk, Eisen directly moved Lockhart out. After all, Lockhart enjoyed being the basilisk-slaying hero, too. Now that there is an interview opportunity with the Daily Prophet, Lockhart should not miss it. Gilderoy Lockhart, I know him. He is a best-selling author like me, Rita said. Her eyes lit up as if she had discovered a big news. I can call him over. I think he will be happy to accept your interview. The corners of Eisen's lips curled up slightly, making a condition that Rita couldn't refuse. Oh, that's really great. I think as the astronomy professor at Hogwarts, you must have something to say to me. Maybe I can conduct an exclusive interview with you, just behind Lockhart? Rita's eyes lit up, and then she looked at Eisen in a daze, as if she wanted to find some breaking news from him. I'm going to find Professor Lockhart. Eisen's expression froze slightly, and he turned and left after leaving a sentence. As soon as the god's perspective was opened, the figure of Lockhart sitting on the sofa in the office had appeared in Eisen's mind. At the corner of the corridor, seeing no one around, Eisen disappeared with a thought, and came to the door of Lockhart's office. Professor Lockhart? Eisen knocked on the door and walked in. I saw Lockhart slumped on the sofa, stroking his chest with his hands from time to time. It seemed that the injuries on his body were still not healed. Professor Eisen, what can I do? Seeing Eisen come in, Lockhart stood up resisting the discomfort, and then showed his signature smile. Yes, the Minister of Magic, Cornelius Fudge, is at Hogwarts, and with him is Miss Skeeter, a reporter from the Daily Prophet. You know, they want to confirm the monster in the Chamber of Secrets. The basilisk was dealt with. Miss Skeeter wants to interview the person who killed the basilisk, and I explained to her that the basilisk was killed by Professor Lockhart. So, would you like to interview her in the foyer? I think this will be on the front page of the Daily Prophet. Eisen smiled and briefly explained the matter. Really, that's really great. Lockhart smiled even wider. I mean, the story of me killing the basilisk must be reported, so that the outside world will know that the trouble at Hogwarts has been resolved. I solved it, and the little wizards are completely safe. This is a very important thing. Of course, I totally agree with you. Eisen shrugged. 10 minutes had passed by the time Eisen and Lockhart arrived in the foyer. Lockhart, who came out of the office, had already changed into a gorgeous purple robe, and his golden hair was also done very delicately. When he saw the man holding the camera walking around in front of the basilisk corpse, Lockhart's eyes lit up, and he came directly to Rita with a smile on his face and preemptively said, Hi, Miss Skeeter. I'm Gilderoy Lockhart, Merlin 3rd class, honorary member of the Anti-Dark Arts League, 5-time Wizards Weekly Award for Most Charming Smile, but I don't talk about that. I don't rely on it to take down basilisks. Before Rita could say anything, Lockhart turned to look at Fudge, saluted gracefully, and said with a bright smile, Minister Fudge, it's an honor to meet you here. Mr. Lockhart, hello. I have read your works, and I must admit that your adventures are extraordinary. Fudge was taken aback for a moment, but then shook hands with Lockhart with a smile on his face. Oh no, I just did what I was supposed to do, Minister, and I can't turn a blind eye to a poor man in trouble. Like the attack at Hogwarts, as defense against the dark arts professor. If you don't deal with the snake if it's weird, the students in the school will be in danger. Lockhart waved his hand modestly, but the smile on his face showed his mood. To be honest, I have been using Yegwa to read and read books recently, change sources, and read aloud with many timbers. Yegwa Udo Android and Apple are all available. You are such a responsible adventurer. Seeing Lockhart's modest look, Fudge immediately said with emotion. Lockhart continued to say something, but Professor McGonagall had already walked over. Minister Fudge, I think it's better for Lockhart to explain how he took care of the basilisk. She waved her wand, dispelling the protective magic around the basilisk. That's right, Lockhart, tell me, how did you discover the monster in the Chamber of Secrets, and how did you find it and solve it? Rita opened the notebook, picked up the shorthand quill, and looked at Lockhart with narrowed eyes. Oh, yes, Lockhart, tell us about it. Fudge looked at Lockhart eagerly. Of course, you know that there were 3 attacks on Hogwarts, but I quickly found the basilisk through some clues. It is hidden in the pipes of Hogwarts, and it has not been discovered for thousands of years. Lockhart looked at Fudge with a smile, while pointing in front of the basilisk corpse. From time to time, Lockhart would pose a pose and look at the photographer Beausois. It seemed that he really enjoyed the gaze of others. Professor Lockhart? You mean, there were 3 attacks at Hogwarts, and after Dumbledore was deposed, you found the basilisk through some clues? Rita looked at Lockhart with a smile, and asked calmly. That's right. You must know that Hogwarts has undergone several transformations, and the internal pipes are so dense that no one can figure out its whole picture. I also found some clues to find the basilisk. Lockhart looked at Rita with a smile. Seeing her shorthand quill continuously record what he said on the paper, the smile suddenly became wider. So, are you going to include your own experience of solving the basilisk in your new book? Rita seemed to be channeling Lockhart's words. Of course, this was a great experience, and I must write it into my new book so that everyone can see how I solve the basilisk, Lockhart said impatiently, his spirits flying high. However, Eisen on the side looked at the two with a strange expression. Rita's shorthand quill kept writing, and although Lockhart didn't know what it was writing, Eisen saw it clearly through God's perspective. Gilderoy Lockhart, an ambitious defense against the dark arts professor at Hogwarts, he found out the basilisk hidden in Hogwarts for thousands of years, but he didn't tell others. But after Hagrid was caught in Azkaban and Dumbledore was deposed, he announced that he had found the basilisk. We have reason to believe that Gilderoy Lockhart, a defense against the dark arts professor who has only been employed for 1 year, is aiming for the post of headmaster of Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. You know, Lockhart's reputation has surpassed Dumbledore's by solving the troubles that have been around for thousands of years at Hogwarts. This is really a terrible plan. So scary. After seeing how Rita's quill transformed Lockhart's words, these 4 big words suddenly appeared in Eisen's mind. Chapter 62 Hagrid Returns. Of course, although Eisen was a little afraid of Rita's pen, he was not afraid of her. After all, Eisen already knew that she was an illegal animagus, and with this in hand, Eisen didn't have to be afraid that she would discredit him in the newspapers. After a while, Rita put away the shorthand quill and put it together with the diary in the crocodile leather handbag in her hand. Then he made a suggestion to Fudge. Minister Fudge, I think we need to take a group photo in front of the basilisk for tomorrow's front page. Oh, of course there's no problem. Fudge smiled slightly and stood in front of the basilisk's huge head. This, Lockhart didn't expect that his photo wasn't on the front page, and his face froze. However, fortunately, he also knew that he was not something he could fight against as the Minister of Magic, so he didn't object. Several people present stood in a row, and Lockhart was arranged beside Fudge, standing in the middle, which made Lockhart quite satisfied. Professor McGonagall was on Lockhart's side, and Rita was on Fudge's other side. Of course, Eisen was not interested in being on the front page of the next day, so he refused to take pictures to join in the fun. The shudder of Katja sounded, and the photos were immediately frozen on several people. The huge basilisk serves as the background, and this group photo serves as the front page, which is indeed easy to attract people's attention. Goodbye, Professor McGonagall. Believe me, Hagrid will be back soon. Fudge made a promise to Professor McGonagall before leaving. Clearly, Hagrid's grievances are about to be cleared. Hey, Professor Eisen, thank you for calling me down for an interview, but I think you should take a photo with me and stand next to me, so I can guarantee you will be famous tomorrow. Lockhart came to Eisen and gave him a hug. In other words, currently the best app for reading and listening to books, Yegwa Reading, Yegwa You Do install the latest version. That's a major event like solving the basilisk. Eisen broke free and stepped aside calmly, and then continued, I'm a professor of astronomy, and I haven't experienced many things. I mean, my experience is not like yours. It's so rich, it's not time to be famous. Well, Professor Eisen, you are right. Lockhart was taken aback, and then said with a smile, Believe me, Professor Eisen, you will be as famous as me in the future. Hee hee, you're right. Eisen said with a fake smile on his face. In the evening, on request indoors, Expelliarmus, a red light shot out from Hermione's wand, hitting Harry who was holding the wand first, and knocked Harry's wand and his whole body into the air. Ahem! Harry got up from the ground, coughed a few times while clutching his chest. His expression was a little ugly. That's right. Hermione is already very proficient in mastering the disarming curse. Harry and Ron, you still need to practice more. Seeing Hermione raised her head and looked at her proud face, Eisen smiled and nodded to Hermione, and then encouraged Harry and Ron. Disarm you. Disarm you. For a while, Harry and Ron began to practice against each other. In terms of using the disarming charm, although Harry was not as proficient as Hermione, he was much better than Ron. Thus, a scene of Harry completely torturing Ron appeared before Eisen's eyes. However, Ron didn't give up. He would try his best to cast spells every time, and from time to time he could successfully release the disarming charm to neutralize Harry's spells. It can be seen that although Ron is the weakest among the trio, he has gradually mastered the disarming spell as he practiced casting spells more often. Professor Eisen, I heard that Hagrid will be back soon? Hermione came to Eisen's side with joy in her tone. Yes, the Minister of Magic, Cornelius Fudge, came to Hogwarts today. He saw the corpse of the basilisk that had been dealt with. He knew that the troubles at Hogwarts had nothing to do with Hagrid, so if nothing else, Hagrid, I should be back tomorrow. Eisen nodded, conjured up a drink and handed it over. That's really great. We all know that Hagrid is not the heir to the Chamber of Secrets, and it was a mistake for Fudge to take Hagrid away. Hermione took a sip of her drink, with a hint of displeasure in her tone. Lucius has always had great dissatisfaction with Dumbledore as the headmaster of Hogwarts. It is normal for him to unite with other school board members to put pressure on the Ministry of Magic when there is an attack on the school. Eisen smiled. The tone didn't fluctuate much. I know that Della's father used to be a Death Eater and subordinate to Voldemort. He has been using his family background and wealth as a weapon to threaten other school board members to obey his orders, Hermione said with a smile on her face, disgusted look. Oh. Eisen was a little surprised, not expecting that Hermione would have the leisure to find out the identity of Lucius Malfoy. Eisen didn't press, though. What about Professor Dumbledore? Seeing Eisen's surprised expression, Hermione blushed slightly and changed the subject directly. Dumbledore. Eisen pondered for a moment. Now that the troubles at Hogwarts had been sorted out, there was no reason for Dumbledore to be deposed. In other words, Dumbledore will be reinstated as headmaster of Hogwarts for some time to come. As for Lucius continuing to pick on Dumbledore, Eisen didn't think it would cause Dumbledore any trouble. After all, Eisen had once told Dumbledore of his speculation that the diary Horcrux had been smuggled by Lucius to some young wizard to bring into Hogwarts. This handle alone is enough to make Lucius throw a mouse. As for Dumbledore continuing to return to Hogwarts to serve as headmaster, Eisen felt that this was beyond doubt. However, even if Dumbledore regained his status as the headmaster, he probably wouldn't stay in the school forever. You know, Eisen not only gave one of Voldemort's Horcruxes to Dumbledore, but also, accidentally, raised the possibility that Voldemort could make 6 Horcruxes. Although such an obvious hint, it was impossible for Dumbledore to be sure that there were 6 Horcruxes. But it should not be like the original work. It will take several years to find clues to the Horcrux. Of course, no matter how you say it, Eisen is sure of one thing. That is, under his reminder, Voldemort's Horcrux will definitely not take as long to be found by Dumbledore as it did in the original book. But now there was a problem. Eisen wasn't sure if Dumbledore had identified Harry as one of Voldemort's Horcruxes. After all, judging from the current situation, Dumbledore knew that the scar on Harry's head would hurt when he was close to Voldemort. In addition, Dumbledore also knew about Harry's old tongue. These 2 points alone could actually convince Dumbledore that there was a connection between Harry and Voldemort, but Eisen felt that he had to wait until he thought Harry was one of Voldemort's Horcruxes. Professor Dumbledore will be back soon to continue his duties as headmaster. Eisen collected his thoughts and gave an answer that made Hermione feel relieved. The next day, the trio arrived at Hagrid's hut after their morning lessons. Harry stepped forward and knocked on the door. After the door was opened, a familiar figure appeared in front of the 3 of them. It was Hagrid who had returned. Hagrid, are you okay? After the 3 of them were led into the room by Hagrid, Harry asked impatiently, looking Hagrid's body up and down while asking, "Oh, it's not a big deal. Fortunately, I was only locked up in Azkaban for 1 day." Hagrid flexed his body and winked at several people. Several people breathed a sigh of relief seeing that Hagrid was in good spirits and that there was nothing wrong with him. "By the way, Hagrid, it's AI, Professor Lockhart. He took care of the monster in the Chamber of Secrets, a huge basilisk. This clears your suspicion." Hermione paused slightly in the middle of speaking and looked at Harry, and Ron continued. "That's right." Ron agreed, taking the grilled sausage Hagrid handed over, taking a big bite. "Yes, I already knew that, but is Lockhart really that, that powerful?" Hagrid looked at the 3 of them with a strange expression and spread out a copy of the Daily Prophet in front of Harry. Hermione and Ron leaned in front of Harry, and when they saw the front page article in the Daily Prophet, they both showed bewildered expressions. The article was written by Rita Skeeter and is titled Gilderoy Lockhart, Basilisk-Slaying Hero or Premeditated Conspirator. The content of the article is what Eisen saw before. It began with Lockhart's heroic act of single-handedly solving the basilisk, saying that he was a hero who saved Hogwarts. But the tone of the later content changed, revealing Lockhart's ambition, saying that he actually waited for 3 attacks on the school on purpose and waited for Dumbledore to be deposed before solving the basilisk, with the purpose of being the headmaster of Hogwarts. Chapter 63 Spoiler. After reading this article, the 3 of them looked at each other for a while. "This must have been written by that woman, Rita Skeeter. You know that woman likes to make things up." Ron swallowed his food and was the first to express his opinion. "But what's written on it makes sense, doesn't it?" Hermione rolled her eyes and made an irrefutable point. Lockhart used to say in class that the matter of the Chamber of Secrets had been solved by him. The first attack, he said that after the incident. If he hadn't planned it for a long time, why did he keep doing it? "Yes, that's right." Harry looked at Hermione in a daze, then seemed to understand her routine, nodded quickly, and took Hermione's words and said, "Lockhart said that one person can solve the monster in the Chamber of Secrets, but he waited until Dumbledore was killed. He only made the move after he was suspended, which shows that he had premeditated." "Really? I don't think it's possible." Hagrid showed a suspicious look. "He's just a liar. How can he deal with the basilisk?" It seems that Professor Eisen discovered the clue to the entrance of the secret room. Ron pointed to the section in the article that introduced Lockhart's discovery of the clue to the entrance to the secret room, with a troubled look on his face. Maybe the above is a bit exaggerated, but Lockhart's character is like that. He likes to show off everywhere, so it's not surprising that he takes some credit for Professor Eisen. Harry explained. That's right. He's been showing off his book adventures and letting us play the characters in class. Ron looked dazed. To be honest, I have been using Yegwa to read and read books recently, changed sources, and read aloud with many timbers. Yegwa to Android and Apple are all available. Just as the trio welcomed Hagrid back on the other side, Eisen came to Dumbledore's office again. Professor Dumbledore, welcome back to Hogwarts. Everyone is looking forward to your return. Sitting on the chair, Eisen looked at the old man with white beard and hair opposite him and couldn't help feeling emotional. To be honest, Dumbledore is like a pinnacle to Hogwarts. With him around, everyone believes that Hogwarts is safe. Except, Dumbledore was too old. Born in 1881, he is now over 110 years old. Even with the help of Eisen's healing bracelet, he wouldn't have survived for many years without being crippled by Marvolo Gaunt's ring curse. After all, Dumbledore doesn't have a Philosopher's Stone to make an elixir of life to extend his life. Of course, to Dumbledore, death was just another great adventure. However, when thinking of these things, one thing made Eisen feel very puzzled. That is there a god of death in this world? In The Tales of Poet Wongbi, is the god of death encountered by the three brothers really a legendary god? If death really exists, why is there no record in the wizarding world? The only thing that mentions the word death is a collection of stories. But how did the Deathly Hallows come about if there was no Grim Reaper? Of course, in his previous life, Eisen once saw a saying on the internet that Dumbledore was actually the god of death, or the incarnation of the god of death. As the story goes, the eldest of the three brothers asked Death for a powerful wand. The second child got the resurrection stone from the god of death. The third child was very clever to get the invisibility cloak to prevent Death from following him. As a result, the eldest was killed by the powerful wand he wanted, and the second committed suicide after resurrecting a woman. Only the third child took off the invisibility cloak and handed it to his son when his lifespan was about to expire. He greeted the god of death like an old friend, and then left the world with the god of death. What's interesting is that according to Eisen's reading, Voldemort represents the eldest of the three brothers, who has been chasing a stronger power, while the second is Snape, who has always wanted to revive Lily and died because of it. Harry is considered the third child. He is brave and not afraid of death. When Dumbledore handed the invisibility cloak to Harry, he said it was his father's. In addition, when Harry encountered the death curse, he saw Dumbledore, the embodiment of death, at King's Cross Station. Of course, such a statement is indeed a bit far-fetched. At least Eisen has no way to determine the authenticity of this kind of thing for the time being. So, when facing Dumbledore, Eisen just needs to do his job. Thank you, Professor Eisen. I heard about the solution to the basilisk in the Chamber of Secrets. Dumbledore smiled slightly. Fortunately, you found the entrance to the Chamber of Secrets and killed the basilisk. Otherwise, Hagrid would have been imprisoned in Azkaban. This is really absurd. I just found the entrance to the Chamber of Secrets. It was Harry who opened it through the talent of Snakespeak. Professor Lockhart killed the basilisk. Eisen continued in a flat tone with his lips curled up. No, Severus has already told. I trust his vision. Dumbledore shook his head, then winked at Eisen. Also, we all know how good Gilderoy is, don't we? Well, there really seems to be no way to hide from Dumbledore. After a slight pause, Eisen nodded and did not speak again. By the way, how is Harry? He also went to the Chamber of Secrets. Can he control the basilisk? Dumbledore's expression was slightly restrained, and he continued to ask Eisen. Professor McGonagall, Professor Snape, and Professor Lockhart were all there at the time. So Harry didn't have a chance to get in touch with the basilisk. Eisen shrugged his shoulders, but I think that Harry has the talent of Old Mouth, so he should be able to control snakes. Weird? Professor Eisen. Dumbledore was silent for a moment, then looked at Eisen solemnly. During this period of time, I explored Tom Riddle's past and found that he is a descendant of Salazar Slytherin. The Gaunt family is the descendant of Slytherin. I think Voldemort is the heir of Slytherin, which is an easy conclusion to draw. Eisen said calmly, with a serious look on his face. That's right, but Harry Potter's ancestors were not Slytherins. Dumbledore glanced at Eisen and continued. Tom inherited the talent for Old Tongue from Salazar. So how did Harry's Old Tongue talent come about? I combed through the past information and found that only Tom had contact with Harry that night. The night Voldemort returned home in front of Harry? With a twitch in his heart, Eisen understood what Dumbledore meant. That's right. The two of them could only connect that night. Dumbledore nodded. By the way, there is something I think you need to know. Eisen narrowed his eyes slightly and said the matter slowly. Last year Voldemort possessed Professor Quirrell and came to Hogwarts to steal the Philosopher's Stone, you still remember? Yes, Quirinus is a very good professor. After graduating from Ron Correo College, he taught defense against the dark arts, and then went to the virgin forests of Albania to gain first-hand practical experience. I think, Tom, it should have possessed him at that time. Dumbledore was slightly taken aback and then said, after Voldemort possessed Professor Quirrell, Harry once told me one thing. During that time, he would have nightmares every night, dreaming that his parents disappeared in a green light. Weird laughter will appear. Eisen's tone was rather flat. Hearing Eisen's words, Dumbledore's expression became more serious. You mean? When Voldemort gets close to Harry, the connection between them will become stronger. This kind of close stimulation will remind Harry of things that happened that night, such as that green light and that laughter. Eisen nodded. Avada Kedavra and Tom. Dumbledore said this conclusion solemnly. Yes, I think, you should know what happened that night. Eisen nodded and continued to remind him. Tom killed James and Lily before Lily sacrificed her life to put a protective spell on Harry. That spell caused Tom's attack to leave a scar on Harry's forehead, but his attack was parried and rebounded. This destroyed his body. But because of the existence of the Horcrux, the rebound attack did not kill him completely, and his remnant soul wandered in the primeval forest of Albania until it met Quirinus. Dumbledore said, as if thinking of something. He frowned tightly. Last time I remember you said that the method of making Horcruxes is very evil, and you need to split your own soul. Eisen said, showing a speculative expression. So, when Voldemort used the killing curse to attack Harry, he was killed by him. When the protection spell resisted and rebounded on himself, it destroyed his body. Is it possible that Voldemort's soul was also torn apart in that attack, and then one piece escaped to Albania, and the other splashed on the only survivor at the time, Harry? Tom made Harry a Horcrux by accident, and that piece of soul created a connection between them, and allowed Harry to inherit the talent of Old Mouth from Tom? Dumbledore stood up and took Eisen's words, with a flash in his eyes. With a flash of light, the magic power in his body surged, making Eisen beside him feel a pressure. Although this is speculation, it is the most reasonable inference. I don't know the specific method of making Horcruxes, and I don't know if people can be made into Horcruxes, but the connection between Harry and Voldemort does exist, yes. Eisen pretended to look solemn, but there was no big disturbance in his heart. Maybe that's the truth of the matter, but it's amazing. Dumbledore paced back and forth in his office. After a while, Dumbledore looked at Eisen. Professor Eisen, I would like you to keep this conclusion a secret, and don't tell anyone else just yet. Of course it's fine, but can't you tell Harry too? Eisen nodded, and then asked back. No, I don't think he's ready for all this. Dumbledore cast a deep look at Eisen. Chapter 64 Solution? Then, if Voldemort is to be completely killed, all the Horcruxes he made must be destroyed. Eisen was silent for a moment, then nodded and continued. Yes, but in that case, it means that Harry will also. Dumbledore opened his mouth, as if he couldn't bear to say the answer. It means that Harry will also be killed? Eisen frowned slightly, but it's too cruel. Is there any other way? I mean, Professor Dumbledore, you are the greatest wizard of our time. No magic could extract the fragments of Voldemort's soul that splashed onto Harry. In this way, it can solve Harry's problems without causing harm to him? Very constructive idea. Dumbledore's eyes lit up, but then darkened again. But the magic that involves the soul is very advanced and complicated, especially in the face of Harry. If he is really Voldemort's Horcrux, then his situation will be very bad. No, I don't think so. Eisen shook his head, looked at Dumbledore who was looking at him, and continued, I'm a Muggle-born wizard. Still now, the only feeling that magic gives me is incredible. Unbelievable magic? Dumbledore mused. Yes, in my opinion, magic itself is an incredible miracle. Since someone can refine the Philosopher's Stone that can turn a stone into gold and make people immortal, someone can create a Horcrux that makes people immortal, and someone can invent teleportation. The curse, so what else is impossible? Eisen still had a look of wonder on his face when he said this. So, what do you mean? Dumbledore looked at Eisen. I don't know how the Horcrux is made, but I think it wasn't invented by Voldemort himself, right? Eisen smiled slightly and brought up a crucial point. That's right, the method of making Horcruxes is recorded in some very advanced black magic books. Tom just discovered the method of making Horcruxes. Seeing the smile on Eisen's face, Dumbledore seemed to be infected and sat down again on the chair. Since this is the case, I dare say that some dark wizards have made Horcruxes in history. Although there are no records about this in the wizarding world, I think the wizard who invented Horcruxes must have made Horcruxes. Eisen said swearingly, with a particularly firm tone. Despicable Hellbow? But in the current wizarding world, apart from Nick Flamel, there is no record of any wizard who can live forever. Dumbledore nodded. This shows that Voldemort's unintentional making of Harry into a Horcrux is actually not something to worry about. Eisen smiled even wider. I mean, even if Harry wasn't killed, he would sooner or later, he will die of old age. 100 years? Or 200 years? Then Voldemort will still die. But in this case, all other Horcruxes need to be destroyed. and it must be ensured that he will not be resurrected to make new Horcruxes. Dumbledore said, frowning again. That's right. As long as Voldemort's escaped remnant soul keeps wandering in the primeval forests of Albania, it's only a matter of time before we find other Horcruxes and destroy them, Eisen said, his expression becoming a little serious again. But the problem is, will Voldemort's remnant soul escape to the primeval forest of Albania? Will he escape to other places? No, I know Tom. Since he was brought out of the primeval forest in Albania by Quirinus, it means he is familiar with it, and he will definitely go there. Dumbledore shook his head. If that's the case, then Professor Dumbledore, you have to do something? Eisen breathed a sigh of relief before continuing. Oh, what's the matter? Dumbledore looked at Eisen curiously. Use your reputation in the wizarding world to promote Harry's identity as the savior, and tell everyone that Voldemort has been completely killed and will never come back. Eisen twitched his mouth and spread his hands. If you say that, everyone will lower their vigilance. Once Tom returns, the consequences will be very serious. Dumbledore frowned, feeling that Eisen's method was very problematic. I know, but don't forget that after Voldemort's downfall, although some of his Death Eaters have betrayed him, there are still some diehards looking forward to Voldemort's return. Eisen revealed a meaningful tone. You mean, the reason for me to spread the news of Tom's complete death is to convince those loyal guys that Tom won't come back? Dumbledore frowned, seeming to understand what Eisen meant. That's right, although the fallen Dark Lord failed, he may still come back, which gives those diehards a glimmer of hope. If you advertise that Voldemort has been completely killed, what do those diehards think? It might change. A smile appeared on Eisen's face. Once those diehards change their minds, they won't be wasting their efforts to search for Voldemort's remnant who might still be alive. But that doesn't guarantee that no one goes to the primeval forests of Albania, does it? Like Quirinus. Dumbledore clearly saw the loophole. Yes, but I think you can also advertise that Albania's primeval forest has horrible monsters, or has been cursed with death, or cast magic to make it a forbidden place. Eisen made another suggestion. It's an amazing idea, but it has the possibility of implementation. Dumbledore looked at Eisen through the half-moon glasses and said slowly, it's just that if Harry's problems are not resolved, I'm not sure how long this method can delay time. So we have to find Voldemort's other Horcruxes as soon as possible, destroy them all, and then the research involving soul magic must not stop, so that it is possible to extract Voldemort's soul fragments from Harry's body. Eisen stretched out his hand and pressed on his temple. I feel that the solution I proposed seems a bit outrageous. Makes sense, I think I really need to. But Harry sighed. Dumbledore nodded, then hesitated again. For Harry's side, I think it's not too late to tell him when the magic research has results. Eisen made a suggestion. The book-chasing app recommended to me by an old book friend who has known me for 10 years. Yet we're reading. It's really easy to use. I rely on reading and listening to books to pass the time while driving and before going to bed. You can download Yegwoyudu here. I mean, Harry knew Tom wasn't quite killed. Dumbledore glanced at Eisen. Okay, I'll tell Harry. Eisen was taken aback. An hour had passed by the time Eisen left Dumbledore's office. Back in the office, Eisen turned the chair into a recliner, lay down on it, and closed his eyes. Eisen wasn't sleeping, just thinking about everything he had said in front of Dumbledore earlier. This time, Eisen knew he had done something big. He not only spoiled the fact that Harry is a Horcrux in a combined way, but also proposed a perfect solution. However, if Eisen's calculations are correct, he thinks this solution should be fine. For example, next time I find an opportunity to tell Dumbledore that I have learned a lot from reading his alchemy experience, and then made an enhanced version of the Looking Glass. Then it was accidentally discovered that Ron's pet Scabbers was Peter Pettigrew. In this way, with Dumbledore's interference, Pettigrew Peter will be imprisoned in Azkaban even if he does not die. If Pettigrew Peter is imprisoned in Azkaban, Voldemort will not be able to revive for the time being. If Dumbledore really had the means to fabricate or create a forbidden place in the primeval forest of Albania, then perhaps the time for Voldemort's return may be far away. Maybe, when Harry Potter died of old age, Voldemort's remnant soul was still wandering in the primeval forests of Albania. Of course, it might not take that long for the Voldemort soul fragment on Harry to be settled by the magic researched by Dumbledore. When the time comes, after all of Voldemort's Horcruxes are destroyed, will his remnant soul continue to wander in the primeval forests of Albania? Maybe, without the ability to sign up for Horcruxes, his remnant soul will be completely annihilated. Even if he can continue to survive by possessing animals, it will be easy to solve if he thinks about it, as long as he burns down the virgin forest in Albania. However, Eisen wasn't sure if Dumbledore would be able to create the magic to deal with Voldemort's soul fragment in Harry. After all, in the original book, Dumbledore also knew the fact that Harry was a Horcrux, but he could only let Harry die. But to say that there is no way to create such magic, Eisen thinks it is a bit impossible. After all, magic in this world is highly idealistic, and if it cannot be created, it is not very reasonable in itself. Chapter 65 Conspirator Lockhart? After taking a long breath, Eisen shook his head and opened his eyes, temporarily clearing the complicated thoughts in his mind. Now that a lot has changed, let's see how things will develop. Anyway, he is confident that as time goes by, he will become less and less afraid of Voldemort. While having dinner in the auditorium in the evening, Eisen noticed that many young wizards were discussing Lockhart's heroic record of single-handedly defeating the boss and brushing the basilisk, but some young wizards showed dissatisfaction and seemed to dislike him. Professor Lockhart is too powerful. He can solve such a big basilisk by himself. Who knows if Lockhart did it on purpose? You haven't read the newspapers. It's Lockhart's conspiracy. That's right. Since Lockhart can deal with the basilisk, why did he wait for several attacks before doing it? He must want to be the headmaster of Hogwarts, as the newspapers say. Hearing the whispers of the little wizards, Eisen was a little puzzled, but then he remembered Rita's interview with Lockhart, and he became a little clearer. How is it? Hagrid is back already? Eisen sat down directly beside Hermione and asked. That's right. Fortunately, the basilisk was eliminated, so Hagrid was only locked up in Azkaban for one day. After hearing Eisen's question, Harry had a smile on his face. Yes, I heard that there are Dementors guarding Azkaban. It's very scary. Hermione showed a look of fear on her face. Since Lockhart solved the basilisk, why are there still many people saying that Lockhart? Eisen showed a puzzled look at the right time, and pointed to the little wizards around him. Not that woman Rita Skeeter, whose article in the Daily Prophet said Professor Lockhart was a conspirator. That pissed him off. Ron had a weird look on his face. Seeing Ron's uncertain expression, Eisen felt a little funny. In the past, Ron hated Lockhart the most, but since Lockhart showed his hand in front of him, Ron's attitude towards Lockhart has not been so bad. Hearing Ron say that Rita was messing with the Daily Prophet, Eisen had a look that he had expected. It seemed that the sentence he'd seen Rita make up earlier had made it into the papers and spread. It's just that Lockhart's true colors have not been completely exposed, and I wonder if his book fans will quarrel with Rita. It's so exciting. I didn't expect that all of this is Lockhart's conspiracy. Fred whispered. That's right. Lockhart must have been planning for a long time, and I was thinking about throwing a big dung egg on his head, but luckily I didn't do anything. George showed a look of fear on his face. But it's too insidious. Look at his performance in the dueling club. He can't even cast the disarming curse. Fred said in disbelief. That's why it's Lockhart's plot to act deliberately cocky at school, convincing everyone that he's a show-off, and then get defeated by Snape at the dueling club meeting, unable to cast the disarm charm. In this way, no one believed that a proud and arrogant person would be willing to lose face, so everyone thought he was really a liar without strength. George showed a look of seeing through everything. Then after the 3 attacks, Hagrid was captured in Azkaban, and Dumbledore was stopped. Lockhart found the basilisk in the Chamber of Secrets and killed it alone to get the headmaster's position. Fred nodded. After hearing the conversation between Wesley's twin brothers, Eisen suppressed a smile and stuffed a piece of steak into his mouth. I have to say that the speculation of the 2 brothers is really reasonable. Professor Eisen, do you think Professor Lockhart is really a conspirator? Hermione watched Eisen frown slightly, as if to see Lockhart's true face. Hearing Hermione's words, several of Gryffindor's students looked at Eisen. I think, although Professor Lockhart can't be called a qualified defense against the dark arts professor, he won't be an insidious and cunning conspirator either. Eisen hesitated for a moment, then slowly expressed his opinion. As for what kind of person Lockhart is, a person with real skills, Eisen doesn't care too much. Anyway, there is very little intersection between them. If that's the case, doesn't that mean that everything written in the newspaper is false? Fred looked at Eisen in surprise. Well, Rita Skeeter, a reporter for the Daily Prophet, her interview style is usually somewhat exaggerated. Eisen nodded. No wonder Professor Lockhart's complexion is not good today. George and Fred looked at each other and whispered. That night, in the room of requirement, Hermione was fighting Harry and Ron. Since Hermione is the most proficient at mastering the disarming spell, Harry and Ron began to team up to deal with Hermione at Eisen's mention. Disarm you. Disarm you. Harry and Ron stared at Hermione, casting the disarming charm at the same time. Disarm you. Hermione quickly cast the disarming charm to neutralize Harry's spell, and at the same time kept moving her feet, turning her body sideways and moving a little distance to avoid Ron's attack. It can be seen that after several days of actual combat training, the level of the 3 of them has improved rapidly. Hermione had mastered the disarming spell perfectly, and even Harry and Ron had mastered it. In other words, currently the best app for reading and listening to books, Yegwa Reading, Yegwa You Do install the latest version. Ribbons of red light emanated from the tops of the 3's wands, and when they shot at each other, they were either dodged or neutralized by the disarming spell. Leaving aside the strength of the 3, let's talk about the rhythm of the 3's footsteps when they attack. In Eisen's opinion, there is already a hint of actual combat. If the 3 of them were to fight against other little wizards, Eisen was confident that the three of them would be able to decide the winner in a short time. It seems that it is time to teach them to defend against the iron armor curse among the magic spells. After all, if a wizard wants to fight in practice, he can't just attack but not defend. Watching the three of them back and forth in the ring, this thought flashed through Eisen's mind. After more than 20 minutes, under the signal of Eisen, the trio stopped. When they came down from the center of the ring, they all looked out of breath. It seems that the high-intensity actual combat training has really exhausted them. Some people may say that using a magic wand to cast spells and attacks still makes people feel tired. That's right, if you just waved your magic wand, the less than half an hour of training really wouldn't be considered tiring. But the actual combat of the three-person team not only needs to cast the spell, but also jumps up and down to avoid the opponent's spell attack. In this way, nearly half an hour of high-intensity training is extraordinarily exhausting. After all, the trio is only 13 years old now, so of course they will feel tired. The actual combat training during this period has been very good. You have already mastered the disarming curse. However, the disarming curse is a spell for attacking the enemy. Next, I will teach you a defensive spell, the iron armor curse. Watching the three gradually calm down, taking a breath, Eisen nodded in satisfaction. Really? Hermione's eyes lit up and her face lit up. Similarly, Harry and Ron on the side also looked at Eisen in surprise. That's right, the Iron Armor Charm is a very powerful defensive spell. Many adult wizards, and even some employees of the Ministry of Magic, are unable to cast this spell. Eisen nodded with a smile. This is a magic spell that can protect yourself, spells that create a magical shield that deflects or reflects objects or other spells. Can the disarming curse bounce back? Ron's eyes lit up, and he asked impatiently. That's right, the Iron Armor Curse can indeed deflect the disarming curse. Eisen smiled slightly, and when he saw the joy on the faces of the three, he couldn't help pouring some cold water. But there are still some things that need to be paid attention to. If there is too much difference in strength between them, then the Iron Armor Curse may not be able to defend against the disarming curse. For example, if you cast the Iron Armor Charm, I or Dumbledore cast the disarming charm on you. Believe me, the Iron Armor Charm you cast may be directly penetrated. Understood, Professor. After hearing what Eisen said, the three of them nodded one after another. Of course, you also need to pay attention to one thing. Although the Iron Armor Curse can defend against most spells, some advanced black magic cannot be defended against. Eisen nodded slightly and continued to talk about some precautions. Avada Kedavra? Hermione uttered an unforgivable curse. That's right, the Iron Armor Curse can't stop the killing curse. You must remember that. Eisen showed admiration to Hermione, so don't think that learning the Iron Armor Curse can relax you in the next actual combat training gone.